The Hidden Secrets of Healing by Max Heindel is not just a book. It is a portal to mystical knowledge that has guided healers and spiritual seekers for centuries. Through its pages, profound teachings are revealed about the invisible forces that influence health, the healing power of vibration and energy, and the connection between the body, soul, and spirit. Since time immemorial, human beings have sought answers about the origin of suffering and the mysteries of healing. Is it possible to alleviate pain through spiritual methods? What role do karma and the evolution of the soul play in physical health? In this work, Heindel introduces us to the hidden principles of esoteric healing, based on the teachings of Western wisdom. Prepare yourself for a revelatory journey, where science and spirituality intertwine in a harmonious dance. Through these teachings, you will discover that true healing goes beyond the physical body. It is a process of inner transformation, energetic balance, and spiritual awakening. Open your mind and heart, for the secrets you are about to hear may change your life forever. The art of healing has been considered sacred knowledge, reserved only for initiates in the occult sciences and the ancient mystery schools. In antiquity, medicine was not seen as a purely materialistic or empirical discipline, but rather as a manifestation of cosmic laws, where health and disease were not random phenomena, but expressions of balance or imbalance between the human microcosm and the universal macrocosm. This text explores the occult principles of health and healing from a holistic perspective, integrating traditional science with spiritual teachings drawn from ancient Hermetic schools, theosophy, Rosicrucianism, and alchemy. Healing, far from being merely a physiological process, is actually an energetic and vibrational transmutation involving invisible forces that have been recognized by various esoteric traditions throughout history. To understand healing from an esoteric perspective, we must move away from the mechanistic and reductionist paradigms of conventional medicine and delve into the lost knowledge of ancient priest healers and mystics, who understood that the physical body is merely a dense projection of a more subtle and complex structure operating on multiple planes of existence. Throughout this work, we will explore the healing methods employed by the Rosicrucian Brotherhood, the relationship between nutrition and consciousness, the role of medical astrology, the influence of light, color, and sound in restoring vital balance, as well as fundamental topics such as sleep, the mind, blood transfusion, and bodily regeneration. To do so, we will draw not only from contemporary advances in vibrational medicine and epigenetics, but also from biblical, Gnostic, Hermetic, and forbidden texts that reveal a transcendent understanding of the true nature of healing. 1. Healing in the sacred tradition, the connection between soul and body. The traditional conception of health, as expressed in modern medicine, tends to view the body as a biological machine whose disorders must be corrected through chemical agents or surgical interventions. However, this materialistic view is not only incomplete, but also ignores the spiritual dimension of disease and healing. Esoteric traditions maintain that the human being is a multidimensional entity composed of various levels of existence: the physical body, the etheric body, the astral body, the mental body, and the spirit. In this sense, illness is merely the physical manifestation of an imbalance that originates on more subtle levels. Christ himself, in both the canonical and apocryphal Gospels, made it clear that healing is not solely a physiological act, but a restoration of harmony between the soul and the body. Your faith has healed you. Go in peace. Luke 8:48. This statement implies that healing is a process in which the consciousness of the patient plays a central role. In the Gnostic tradition, disease is seen as the result of energetic imbalance and errors in perception that prevent alignment with the divine source. Similarly, Hermetic texts teach that as above, so below, meaning that any ailment manifesting in the physical plane has its correspondence in the astral and mental planes. Esoteric medicine, therefore, does not seek merely to eliminate symptoms, but to restore harmony to the entire system. 2. The Rosicrucian Brotherhood and the Art of Spiritual Healing. One of the most fascinating aspects of this work is the exploration of the healing methods employed by the Rosicrucian Brotherhood, one of the most influential esoteric orders in history. The Rosicrucians maintain that disease can be treated through vibrational transmutation, using the power of thought, breath, and natural elements in harmony with cosmic energies. Among the most important healing practices of the Rosicrucian Brotherhood are meditation on divine light as a means of restoring energetic balance, the use of medical astrology to diagnose and treat illnesses based on planetary influences, the employment of herbs, minerals, and alchemical preparations to regenerate tissues and purify the blood, the application of colors and sound vibrations to unblock the body's energy centers. This knowledge, largely hidden by medical and religious institutions, represents a revolution in the understanding of health, demonstrating that healing is ultimately a process of inner transformation. 3. The science of nutrition, food, vibration, and consciousness. Nutrition not only impacts the physical body, but directly influences an individual's state of consciousness. The ancient mystery schools taught that the vibration of food affects the energetic structure of the human being, determining their ability to access higher states of perception. Esoteric nutrition is based on the understanding that not everything that is nourishing for the body is beneficial for the soul. The Gospel of the Essenes, an apocryphal text attributed to Christ, reveals hidden knowledge about diet and health. The angels of the air, the water, and the sun cleanse your body. But if you are not in harmony with your spirit, disease will return to you. This teaching leads us to consider that nutrition should not be limited to the material aspect, but should also include mental, emotional, and spiritual purity. 4. Medical astrology, cosmic diagnosis and healing. Another pillar of this text is the relationship between astrology and healing. Since ancient times, priest-physicians have used astrology as a diagnostic tool, understanding that each organ of the body is governed by a planet, and that energetic imbalances can be corrected by aligning with the appropriate cosmic influences. In this sense, medical astrology is not a superstition, but a precise method of diagnosis and treatment, which has been rediscovered today through quantum medicine and bioenergetics. This text is not just a compendium of knowledge on healing, but an invitation to transform our understanding of health and life. As we progress through this work, we will understand that true healing does not come solely from medications or physical treatments, but from alignment with the universal laws that govern existence. Light, sound, vibration, and the mind are not just therapeutic tools, but gateways to a higher reality where disease ceases to exist. Thus, we delve into the mysteries of esoteric healing, recovering the ancient knowledge that will allow us to restore balance and access the fullness of being. Esoteric Healing, the connection between body, mind, and spirit. By Max. We have noticed that more than 60% of those who visit our channel are not subscribed. You can support this project by pressing the subscribe button and liking the video. Thank you for inspiring us to continue creating more and better content for you. Are you ready to transform your life? Chapter 1. The Origin and Development of Healing. There is a saying that man's days are few and full of trouble. Among all the trials of life, none affects us more deeply than the loss of health. We may lose fortunes or friends with relative equanimity, but when health fails and death looms, even the strongest waver. Realizing human helplessness, we become more inclined to turn to divine power for help than at any other time. Therefore, the role of the spiritual counselor has always been closely linked to healing. Among primitive societies, the priest was also the healer. In ancient Greece, Aesculapius was especially sought after by those in need of healing. The Church followed in these footsteps, and certain Catholic orders have continued the effort to alleviate suffering through the centuries. In times of illness, the good priest would come as a representative of our Father in heaven. What he lacked in medical skill, he compensated for with love, sympathy, if he was a true and holy priest, and the faith that his sacred office inspired in the patient. His care for the patient did not begin at the sickbed, nor end with recovery. The gratitude of the patient toward the physician was added to the reverence felt for the spiritual counselor, and as a result, the priest's ability to help and uplift his former patient increased tremendously. The bond between them was much stronger than it could ever be when the roles of spiritual counselor and physician were separated. It is evident that the art of medicine has reached a degree of efficiency that could not have been achieved without complete dedication to this goal. The safeguards of health laws, the eradication of disease-carrying insects, and other scientific advancements serve as monumental testimonies to the value of modern scientific methods. Thus, it may seem that all is well and that no further effort is needed. However, in reality, until humanity as a whole enjoys perfect health, there is no more important question than how we can achieve and maintain it. Besides the conventional school of surgery and medicine, which relies exclusively on physical means to treat disease, other systems have emerged that depend entirely on mental healing. Organizations that promote mental healing, natural healing, and similar methods often hold experience-sharing meetings and publish journals filled with testimonies from grateful supporters who have benefited from their treatments. If conventional medical practitioners did the same, there would be no shortage of similar testimonies proving their effectiveness. The opinions of thousands of people carry great weight, but they do not constitute proof, as thousands of others may hold an opposing view. Sometimes, a single individual may be right while the rest of the world is mistaken, just as Galileo was when he maintained that the earth moves. Today, the entire world has embraced the very idea for which he was once persecuted as a heretic. We maintain that since man is a composite being, healing succeeds to the extent that it addresses defects on the physical, moral, and mental planes of existence. Curing versus healing. Since the vast majority of people do not distinguish between curing and healing, it may be useful to explain the difference, which lies primarily in cooperation, or the lack thereof. One person may attempt to cure another through massage or medication. In either case, the patient remains passive, like clay being molded by the potter. There is no doubt that such treatment may relieve symptoms, and the person may feel better. However, this relief is merely temporary. The patient has not gained a true understanding of the underlying cause of their illness. They do not realize that disease results from violating the laws of nature, and are therefore likely to repeat the same mistakes, leading to a recurrence of their illness. A cure is a physical process. Healing, on the other hand, is radically different. It always requires that the patient actively cooperate, both spiritually and physically, with the healer. To illustrate this, we need look no further than the life and work of our great leader, Christ. When people came to him for healing, they did not expect a physical treatment. Rather, they knew that relief would come through the Spirit. Their faith in him was boundless, and this was essential to the process. This is evident in the incidents recorded in the 13th chapter of Matthew, where it is said that he went among the people with whom Jesus, the original owner of the body, had lived in his early youth. They saw only the outward man and said, "Is this not Jesus, the son of Joseph? Are not his brothers among us?" They believed that nothing great could come from Nazareth, and according to their faith, so it was done unto them. As we read, he did not perform many mighty works there because of their unbelief. However, faith without works is dead. In every case where Christ healed someone, the person had to do something. They had to actively cooperate with the great healer before their healing could take place. He said, "Stretch out your hand." When the man obeyed, his hand was healed. To another he said, "Take up your bed and walk." When he did so, the illness vanished. To the blind man he said, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam." To the leper, "Show yourself to the priest and offer your gifts." In all cases, there was active cooperation from the one to be healed, which helped the healer. These were simple requirements, but they had to be fulfilled so that the spirit of obedience could assist in the healer's work. When Naaman went to Elijah, expecting the prophet to come out with a great display of magic and ceremony to cleanse his leprous spots, he was greatly disappointed. And when the prophet told him, "Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River," he became furious to the point of exclaiming, "Do we not have great rivers in Assyria? Why should I have to wash in the Jordan? What nonsense!" He lacked the spirit of submission, which is absolutely necessary for the work to be accomplished. It can be said that, had he persisted in his defiance, he would not have received healing from his illness. Similarly, none of those healed by Christ would have been affected unless they had obeyed and done what they were commanded. This is a law of nature that is absolutely certain. It is disobedience that brings illness, while obedience, whether it involves washing in the Jordan or stretching out one's hand, demonstrates a change in mindset, putting the person in a condition to receive the healing balm, which may come through Christ or a healer of one kind or another, as the case may be. In all cases, the healing power ultimately comes from our Heavenly Father, the great physician. These are the 3 great factors in healing. First, the power of our Father in heaven. Second, the healer. And third, the obedient mind of the patient, upon which the Father's power can act through the healer in such a way as to dispel all bodily ailments. Let us now understand that the entire universe is permeated with the Father's power, always available to heal all forms of suffering. That is the great certainty. The healer is the focus, the vehicle through which the power is infused into the patient's body. If they are a suitable instrument, consecrated, harmonious, real, and truly attuned to the infinite, there is no limit to the wondrous works of the Father that can be accomplished through them, provided the patient presents a properly receptive and obedient mind. Chapter 2. The Healing Method of the Rosicrucian Brotherhood. Why do the Rosicrucians heal? Among all the nonsense and misconceptions that have circulated about the Rosicrucians over the past centuries, there is one great truth. Members of the order aim to heal the sick and possess superior means to carry out this benevolent purpose. Earlier religious orders sought spiritual advancement by punishing and mistreating the body, but the Rosicrucians exhibit the utmost care for this instrument. There are two reasons for their healing activities. Like all devoted followers of Christ, they eagerly await the day of the Lord. They understand that Lucifer, the false light of Lemuria, implanted passion, ushering humanity into sin and bringing about pain, suffering, and death. They also know that Christ, the true light of the coming New Galilee, inaugurated the Immaculate Conception and preached the gospel of redemption from sin through love. Celibacy is appropriate for Eastern aspirants, as those lower races will soon become extinct. However, for the West, celibacy contradicts the evolutionary plan because a new race must be nurtured here. Therefore, generative purity is the disciples' watchword in this part of the world. A new race must be lovingly brought into existence, and thus the afflictions that now plague humanity, born from generations conceived in passion, will cease. Even death itself will ultimately be overcome in the new dispensation, for the ethereal purity of bodies will eliminate the need for renewal. Although the Bible contains definitive information about this future era, one point remains shrouded in mystery. No one knows the day, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son. Christians of all ages, ever since the gospel was first preached, have longed for that day when the children of light shall be revealed. Only the Father, the highest initiate among the lords of mind, can foresee when the separative and selfish mind will yield to the unifying, self-denying spirit of love. However, one thing is very clear: living under the conditions of the new heaven and the new earth will be as impossible for those without the properly constituted body, symbolized as the wedding garment in the Bible, as it was for the degenerate Atlanteans who lacked lungs to breathe when the atmospheric change occurred. It is a scientific fact that the state of the blood affects the mind, and vice versa. Therefore, a healthy body is essential for a sound mind, and only a sound mind can transcend passion. Likewise, only a healthy body can generate another equally pure being. The Rosicrucians have undertaken the mission of healing the body so that it may house a healthy mind and a pure love. For every conception under these conditions is a step toward the day of the Lord, which we also ardently long for. This is the reason for their healing activities, and it is the meaning of their motto: a sound mind, a gentle heart, a healthy body. It has been written in various works that members of the order took a vow to heal others free of charge. This statement is somewhat misleading. The lay brothers took a vow to minister to all according to their best abilities freely. That vow, of course, included healing. For men like Paracelsus, who possess skill in this direction, the combined method of physical remedies applied under favorable stars and spiritual counsel proved highly effective. Others were not suited to be healers but worked in different areas. However, they all shared one common trait. They never charged for their services and worked in secret, without trumpet calls or drum beats. Christ gave two commands to his messengers: preach the gospel of the coming age and heal the sick. One is as binding as the other, and for the reasons given above, the second command is just as necessary. To fulfill this mandate, the elder brothers have developed a healing system that combines the best elements of the various current schools with a method of diagnosis and treatment that is as reliable as it is simple. This marks a great step forward in elevating the art of healing from the shifting sands of experimentation to the solid rock of exact knowledge. It is a true, good, and valid reason. When we say that we want to help others for the love of Christ, we must remember that he is now immersed in the earth, groaning and suffering, awaiting liberation. Pain and illness are caused by the transgression of the laws of life. Therefore they crystallize the dense body, strengthen the grip of the vital body, and delay the day of our liberation, as well as his. By helping the sick achieve health and teaching them to live in harmony with the laws of life so they can maintain that health, we are hastening the day of his coming. May God bless our efforts and strengthen our hands in this good work. Our method of healing is not entirely a spiritual matter. We use physical means whenever possible. There are even times when we send our patients to a doctor so they can obtain quick relief through a specific treatment that we cannot provide as rapidly by other methods. Additionally, the patient's diet receives careful attention because, naturally, as the body is formed from physical substances, we administer medicine through the use of proper nutrition. Moreover, healing is carried out by the elder brothers through a group of invisible helpers whom they instruct. These invisible auxiliaries are probationers who, during the day, live a life worthy of service and therefore align themselves or earn the privilege of being useful through the instrumentality of the elder brothers. At night, these probationers gather in groups according to their temperaments and abilities under the instruction of other probationers who are doctors, and they all work under the direction of the elder brothers, who are naturally the guiding spirits behind the entire work. The system for training and organizing a band of invisible helpers is carried out through the use of the effluvia of their vital bodies. The first of these effluvia is obtained at the moment the probationer signs their obligation, and it is renewed daily when they make their entry in their blank report. As long as they remain faithful and live a life of purity and service, they form an unbroken link between themselves and the elder brothers. Each group of healers is usually composed of 12 probationers in addition to their instructor, and they are generally taken from the same locality because nighttime is the same for all of them. It would not be feasible to group someone living in Australia with another in Alaska, as one would be engaged in their daily work while the other is taking their nightly rest. However, individuals from almost anywhere in North or South America experience more or less the same hours of rest and recuperation. These probationers are then grouped according to their ascendant signs so that they can form a complete circle. Regarding the system used to locate those who have written to headquarters requesting help, the same method is followed as for finding the probationers. That is, applicants for assistance must write their request letter with pen and ink. In doing so, the paper becomes impregnated with a part of their vital body, which is then extracted from the letter by the elder brothers. This substance serves as a precise indicator of the individual's condition and also acts as a sesame key for the helpers working on the case. Through it, they have free access to the patient's body. A considerable number of patients who come for healing have written to say that they have seen and felt the helpers working both inside and outside their bodies. As the patient's condition changes, so does their record. Therefore, patients are asked to write a few words each week with pen and ink and mail them to headquarters. This ensures that the elder brothers are in constant contact with their condition and can intelligently direct the work of restoring health. This work never ceases. It is continuous, for the sun is always absent from one part of the globe, and the probationers in that region are actively engaged in healing and assisting during their hours of bodily rest. Anatomically, man belongs to the class of mammals whose red blood cells are non-nucleated. The nuclei found in the blood of lower animals serve as a playground for group spirits. However, higher animals have progressed so far along the path of individualization that their blood is free from this influence. In the fetus, where the mother acts as the group spirit during the first weeks, she nucleates the blood. But as soon as the ego begins its work, the first thing it does is to disintegrate those nucleated blood corpuscles, and by the moment of quickening, not a single one remains. The ego then becomes the master of its vehicle, a heritage that no one can take away under any pretext. To do so constitutes black magic, whether the person is aware of it or not. While a benevolent motive would, of course, have some mitigating effect in another direction, the fact remains that one is treading on dangerous ground when attempting to interfere with someone's blood without their consent or request for such treatment. There is only one exception to this rule. Children up to the age of puberty are, so to speak, still a part of their parents. This is because an essence of parental blood is stored in the thymus gland, which the child uses in the production of their own supply during infancy, while the desire body is in the process of gestation. As time passes, the supply in the thymus gland gradually diminishes, and the child increasingly attains awareness of their own individuality. When the thymus gland disappears, the desire body has matured enough to participate in the alchemy of transmuting the Saturnine skeleton into the Jupiterian vehicle, which will incorporate the essence of the present physical body. Interference with the blood halts this process. Therefore, it is only up until puberty that a parent can act on behalf of their child by providing the ether that allows the invisible helper to work. The greatest hindrance to our healing activity comes from the negligence of the patients. Our requirements are very simple. We only ask them to write once a week with pen and ink, so that the etheric effluvia emitted from the hand during writing can provide our invisible helpers with a key to access the patient's system. However, as simple as this rule is, some do not comply. Here is a case in which a person had suffered from displaced vertebrae for many years and was healed through our treatment, even though osteopaths, chiropractors, and several others who had tried found it impossible to realign the vertebrae. As a result, the poor man was in constant pain, bedridden most of the time, and completely unable to work. The treatment by our invisible helpers repositioned the vertebrae, and they still remain in place. The man set to work and found it wonderful, but feeling so exalted by the idea that he was completely free, he disregarded our instructions to continue writing so that our invisible helpers would have the opportunity to keep his vertebrae in place long enough for them to stay permanently aligned. Now comes the following case, which proves that we were right in asking him to do so, and that he was wrong not to obey. He says, "Not long ago I wrote that I was healed and that I would stop writing my weekly letters. But now I see that I made a great mistake. Since then, my back has been hurting almost all the time, and I am starting to develop rounded shoulders again. Although the vertebrae are in the place where the injury was, it seems like I am asking too much for you to accept me a second time, but I did not realize the influence that the invisible helpers had on me and how much I depended on them." The spiritual panacea in Christ's coming to earth. We find an analogy between Christ's coming to earth and the administration of the spiritual panacea. According to the law, as above, so below, every small cell in the human body has its own separate life. But above it is the ego, which directs and controls all the cells so that they act in harmony. During certain prolonged illnesses, the ego becomes so focused on suffering that it stops vitalizing the cells entirely. Thus, physical ailments lead to mental inertia, and it may become impossible to rid oneself of disease without a special impulse that dispels the mental fog and reactivates cellular activities. That is what the spiritual panacea does. Just as the Christ life on Golgotha began to dispel the shell of fear created by the inexorable law that hung like a mantle over the earth, initiating millions of human beings onto the path of peace and goodwill, so too, when the panacea is applied, the concentrated Christ life it contains rushes through the patient's body and infuses every cell with a rhythm that awakens the imprisoned ego from its lethargy, restoring life and health. To describe the panacea, an experience of the author will be recounted. On a memorable night, he was shown in the Rosicrucian temple a substance with which the universal spirit could combine as easily as large amounts of ammonia combine with water. 3 spheres were suspended one above the other in the center of the temple. The middle sphere was halfway between the floor and the ceiling, and was much larger than the other 2, which hung above and below. Inside the large central sphere there was a smaller one containing several packets filled with this substance. When the brothers had positioned themselves in certain locations, and the harmony of certain music had prepared the way, suddenly the 3 globes began to shine with the 3 primary colors: blue, yellow, and red. To the writer's vision, it became evident that during the chanting of the formula, the container holding the aforementioned packets became infused with a spiritual essence that was not there before. Some of them were later used by the brother with instant success. Before them, the crystallized particles that encased the patient's spiritual centers dissolved as if by magic, and the sick person awakened to a recognition of health and physical well-being. Chapter 3, The Science of Nutrition, General Principles. We always consider the dense vehicle and the physical means available to improve it, making it the best possible instrument for the spirit. Only afterward do we consider the spiritual means for the same purpose. Since we include all the other vehicles as well, we will follow this method. The first visible stage of a human embryo is a small, globular, pulpy, or gelatinous substance similar to albumin or the white of an egg. In this pulpy globule, several particles of more solid matter appear. These gradually increase in volume and density until they come into contact with each other. The various points of contact slowly modify into joints or hinges, and thus a distinct skeletal framework of solid matter gradually forms. During the formation of this framework, the surrounding pulpy matter accumulates and changes shape until it finally develops into what is known as a fetus. The fetus continues to grow larger, firmer, and more fully organized until birth, when the stage of infancy begins. The same process of consolidation that began with the first visible stage of existence still continues. The being passes through the different stages of infancy, childhood, youth, adulthood, and old age, finally reaching the change called death. Each of these stages is characterized by an increased degree of hardness and solidity. There is a gradual increase in the density and firmness of the bones, tendons, cartilage, ligaments, tissues, membranes, and even the very substance of the stomach, liver, lungs, and other organs. Joints become stiff and begin to crack and creak when moved because the synovial fluid that lubricates and softens them decreases in quantity and becomes too thick and glutinous to serve its purpose. The heart, brain, entire muscular system, spinal cord, nerves, eyes, and other parts of the body undergo the same process of consolidation, becoming increasingly rigid. Millions upon millions of tiny capillaries, which branch and extend like the limbs of a tree throughout the body, gradually become clogged and turn into solid fibers, no longer permeable to blood. The larger blood vessels, both arteries and veins, harden, lose their elasticity, shrink, and become incapable of transporting the necessary amount of blood. The body's fluids thicken and become putrid, filled with earthy matter. The skin withers, wrinkles, and dries out. The hair falls out due to a lack of oil. The teeth decay and fall out due to a lack of gelatin. The motor nerves begin to dry up, and the body's movements become clumsy and slow. The senses fail, blood circulation slows down, stagnates, and congests in the vessels. As the body increasingly loses its former powers, once elastic, healthy, alert, flexible, active, and sensitive, it becomes rigid, sluggish, and unresponsive. Eventually, it dies of old age. The question that arises now is, what is the cause of this gradual ossification of the body, which brings stiffness, decrepitude, and death? From a purely physical standpoint, chemists seem to be unanimous in their opinion that it is primarily due to an increase in calcium phosphate, bone matter, calcium carbonate, common lime, and calcium sulfate, plaster of Paris, occasionally with some magnesia and an insignificant amount of other earthy substances. The only difference between the body of old age and that of infancy is the greater density, hardness, and rigidity caused by the higher proportion of calcareous and earthy matter in the former. The bones of a child are composed of 3 parts, gelatin to 1 part earthy matter. In old age, this proportion is reversed. What is the origin of this deadly accumulation of solid matter? It seems axiomatic that the entire body is nourished by the blood, and that everything contained in the body, of any nature, has first been in the blood. Analysis shows that blood contains earthy substances of the same type as the solidifying agents. And take note, arterial blood contains more earthy matter than venous blood. This is very important. It shows that with each cycle, the blood deposits earthy substances. Therefore, it is the common carrier that suffocates the system. But its supply of earthy matter must be replenished, otherwise it could not continue doing so. Where does it renew its deadly load? There can be only one answer to that question: from food and drink. There is absolutely no other source. The food and drink that nourish the body must also be the primary source of the calcareous and earthy matter that the blood deposits throughout the system, causing decrepitude and eventually death. To sustain physical life, it is necessary to eat and drink, but since there are many types of food and beverages, it is up to us, in light of the foregoing facts, to determine whether it is possible to identify which types contain the least proportion of destructive matter. If we can find such foods, we can extend our lifespan. And from the occult perspective, it is desirable to live as long as possible in each dense body, especially after having embarked on the spiritual path. It takes so many years to educate the body through childhood and youth, so long for each inhabited body to become at least somewhat responsive to the spirit's control. that the longer we can preserve a body that has become susceptible to spiritual impulses, the better. Therefore, it is crucial that the aspirant partakes only of those foods and beverages that deposit the least amount of hardening matter while also keeping the excretory organs active. The skin and urinary system are humanity's saviors from premature death. Were it not for their role in eliminating the majority of the earthy matter extracted from our food, no one would live to the age of 10. It has been calculated that ordinary undistilled spring water contains carbonate and other lime compounds to such an extent that the average amount consumed daily by a person, in the form of tea, coffee, soup, etc., would, over 40 years, form a solid chalk or marble block the size of a man. It is also a significant fact that although calcium phosphate is always found in the urine of adults, it is absent in the urine of children, because in them the rapid formation of bones requires the retention of this salt. During gestation, there is very little earthy matter in the mother's urine, as it is being used to build the fetus. Under normal circumstances, however, earthy matter is very evident in the urine of adults, and we owe to this process the fact that physical life even reaches its current duration. Undistilled water, when taken internally, is humanity's worst enemy, but when used externally, it becomes our best friend. It keeps the pores of the skin open, promotes blood circulation, and prevents stagnation, which provides the best opportunity for the deposition of the deadly earthy phosphate of lime. Harvey, who discovered blood circulation, stated that health denotes free circulation and that disease results from obstructed circulation of the blood. The bathtub is a great aid in maintaining bodily health and should be used freely by the aspirant to higher living. Both sensible and insensible perspiration remove more earthy matter from the body than any other mechanism. As long as fuel is supplied and the fire is kept free of ashes, it will burn. The kidneys play a crucial role in eliminating the body's ashes. However, despite the vast amount of earthy matter excreted through the urine, in many cases enough remains to form gravel and stones in the bladder, causing indescribable agony and often death. Let no one be deceived into thinking that water contains less stone because it has been boiled. The stone that forms at the bottom of the kettle was left behind by the evaporated water that escaped as steam. If the steam were condensed, we would obtain distilled water, which is an important aid in keeping the body young. There is absolutely no earthy matter in distilled water, rainwater, snow, or hail, except what may be collected from contact with rooftops and other surfaces. However, coffee, tea, or soup made with ordinary water, no matter how much they are boiled, are not purified of their earthy particles. On the contrary, the longer they are boiled, the more laden with ashes they become. Those suffering from urinary diseases should never drink anything other than distilled water. In general, it can be said that among the solid foods we consume, fresh vegetables and ripe fruits contain the highest proportion of nourishing matter and the least amount of earthy substances. Proper nutrition, administered at the right time and under appropriate conditions, not only cures but also prevents disease. It is commonly believed that sugar, or any saccharine substance, is harmful to health in general and particularly to the teeth, causing decay and consequent toothaches. This is only true under certain circumstances. It is harmful in certain conditions, such as bile disorders and dyspepsia, or if it is kept in the mouth for too long, like candy. However, when used in moderation during good health and when its quantity is gradually increased as the stomach becomes accustomed to it, sugar is found to be highly nutritious. The health of black workers improved significantly during the sugarcane harvest, despite their increased labor. This is attributed solely to their fondness for the sweet cane juice. The same is true for horses, cows, and other animals in those regions, which enjoy the discarded syrup given to them. They fatten during the harvest season, and their coats become sleek and glossy. Horses fed on carrots for several weeks will develop a silky coat due to the saccharine juices of this vegetable. Sugar is a nutritious and beneficial dietary item, and it contains no ash. Fruits are an ideal diet. In fact, the tree has developed them to entice animals and humans to eat them so that the seeds can be dispersed, just as flowers attract bees for a similar purpose. Fresh fruit contains the purest and most beneficial form of water, capable of permeating the system in a remarkable way. Grape juice is a particularly wonderful solvent. It thins and stimulates the blood, clearing pathways to dried and clogged capillaries. If the process has not gone too far, through a treatment of unfermented grape juice, people with sunken eyes, wrinkled skin, and poor complexion become plump, rosy, and lively. The increase in permeability allows the spirit to manifest more freely and with renewed energy. Considering the body from a purely physical point of view, it is what we might call a chemical furnace, with food as the fuel. The more the body is exercised, the more fuel it requires. It would be unwise for a person to switch from an ordinary diet that has nourished them adequately for years to a new method without properly considering which would be best to serve their purpose. Simply eliminating meat from the diet of habitual meat eaters would undoubtedly undermine the health of most people. The only safe way is to experiment and study the matter first, using proper discernment. Fixed rules cannot be given, as diet is as individual as any other characteristic. All that can be done is to describe the general influence of each chemical element, allowing the aspirant to develop their own method. Nor should we allow a person's appearance to influence our judgment of their health. Certain general ideas about the appearance of a healthy person are commonly accepted, but there is no valid reason to judge by them. Rosy cheeks may be a sign of health in one individual and of illness in another. There is no particular rule by which good health can be known, except the feeling of comfort and well-being that the individual enjoys, regardless of appearances. Water is the great solvent. Nitrogen or protein is the essential builder of flesh, though it contains some earthy matter. Carbohydrates, or sugars, are the primary energy producers. Fats generate heat and store reserve strength. Ash is mineral-based and clogs the system. We should not fear obtaining too little of it to build bones. On the contrary, we cannot be too careful to obtain as little as possible. A calorie is a simple unit of heat. In a pound of Brazil nuts, for example, as bought in the market, 49.6% is waste, shells, but the remaining 50.4% contains 1,485 calories. This means that about half of what is purchased is waste, but the rest contains the mentioned number of calories. To derive the greatest strength from our food, we must pay attention to the number of calories it contains, as they provide the necessary energy for our daily work. Chocolate is the most nutritious food we have. However, cocoa in its powdered form is the most dangerous of all foods, as it contains 3 times more ash than most others and 10 times more in some cases. It is a powerful food and also a powerful poison, as it clogs the system more quickly than any other substance. Of course, initially some study will be required to ensure the best diet, but it pays off in health and longevity and ensures free use of the body, making study and application to higher things possible. After some time, one will become so familiar with the subject that no special attention will be needed. It should be remembered that not all chemical substances in food are available for use by the body, as there are certain portions that the body refuses to assimilate. Of vegetables, we digest about 83% of the proteins, 90% of the fats, and 95% of the carbohydrates. From fruits, we assimilate approximately 85% of the proteins, 90% of the fats, and 90% of the carbohydrates. Phosphorus is the particular element through which the ego can express thought and influence the dense physical body. It is also a fact that the proportion and variation of this substance correspond to the state and stage of an individual's intelligence. Idiots have very little phosphorus, brilliant thinkers have a lot, and in the animal kingdom, the degree of consciousness and intelligence is proportional to the amount of phosphorus in the brain. Therefore, it is of great importance that the aspirant, who will use their body for mental and spiritual work, supplies their brain with the necessary substance for that purpose. Most vegetables and fruits contain some amount of phosphorus, but it is a peculiar fact that the highest proportion is found in the leaves, which are usually discarded. It is found in considerable amounts in grapes, onions, sage, beans, cloves, pineapples, the leaves and stems of many vegetables, and also in sugarcane juice, but not in refined sugar. The following table shows the proportions of phosphoric acid in some foods. 100.00 parts of dried barley contain 210 parts of phosphoric acid. Beans, 292 parts. Beets, 167 parts. Beet leaves, 690 parts. Buckwheat, 170 parts. And dried carrots, 395 parts. Carrot leaves, 963 parts. Flaxseed, 880 parts. Flaxseed stalks, 118 parts. Parsnips, 111 parts. Parsnip leaves, 190 parts. In conclusion, the aspirant should choose foods that are easiest to digest, as the more easily energy is extracted from food, the more time the system has to recover before it is necessary to replenish its supply. Milk should never be drunk as one drinks a glass of water. Taken that way, it forms a large lump of cheese in the stomach that is quite impermeable to the action of gastric juices. It should be sipped so that it forms many small globules in the stomach, which are easily assimilated. Citrus fruits are powerful antiseptics, and cereals, especially rice, are highly effective antitoxins. Having now explained from a purely material point of view what is necessary for the dense body, we will consider the subject from an occult perspective, taking into account the effects on the two invisible bodies that interpenetrate it. Anger is an example of this. In such moments, the entire muscular system is tense, and no hard labor is as exhausting as a fit of anger. Sometimes it leaves the body prostrated for weeks. One can see the need to improve the desire body by controlling temperament, thus sparing the dense body from suffering caused by the uncontrolled action of the desire body. Looking at the matter from an occult point of view, all consciousness in the physical world results from the constant struggle between the desire and vital bodies. The tendency of the vital body is to soften and build. Its main expression is through the blood, glands, and also the sympathetic nervous system. Once the desire body has gained entry into the stronghold, it influences the voluntary nervous and muscular systems. When it began to develop the heart into a voluntary muscle, the tendency of the desire body was to harden, and in turn, it invaded the domain of the vital body, gaining possession of the vessel and manufacturing the white blood corpuscles. These are not the system's police as science currently believes, but rather destroyers. The desire body uses the blood to transport these tiny destroyers throughout the body. They pass through the walls of the arteries and veins whenever discomfort is felt, especially in moments of great anger. At such times, the torrent of forces in the desire body causes the arteries and veins to swell, opening the way for white corpuscles to enter the body's tissues, where they establish bases for the earthy matter that ultimately destroys the body. Given the same quantity and type of food, a person with a calm and cheerful disposition will live longer, enjoy better health, and be more active than a person who worries or frequently loses their temper. The latter will produce and distribute more destructive white corpuscles throughout their body than the former. If a scientist were to analyze the bodies of these two individuals, they would find considerably less earthy matter in the body of the kind and amiable person compared to the grumpy one. This destruction occurs constantly, and it is impossible to keep all the destroyers away, nor is that the intention. If the vital body had uninterrupted control, it would continually build and rebuild, using all available energy for that purpose. There would be no consciousness or thought. It is because the desire body governs and hardens the inner structures that consciousness develops. There was a time in the distant past when we expelled solid matter from our bodies as mollusks do, leaving the body soft, flexible, and boneless. But during that era, our consciousness was as dim and vague as that of mollusks today. Before we could progress further, it became necessary to retain these structures. It has been observed that the stage of consciousness in any species is proportional to the development of its skeletal structure. The ego must have solid bones with semi-fluid red marrow to produce red corpuscles for its expression. This represents the highest development of the dense body. Reasons for a vegetarian diet. Most people consider a meal without meat to be incomplete, because since time immemorial, it has been assumed that meat is the strongest food available. All other foods have been regarded as mere accompaniments to one or more types of meat in a meal. However, nothing could be further from the truth. Science has demonstrated through experiments that plant-based food invariably has greater sustaining power. The reason for this is clear when we examine the matter from an esoteric perspective. The law of assimilation states that no particle of food can be incorporated into the body until it has been overcome by the indwelling spirit, because the spirit must be the absolute and unquestioned ruler of the body, governing the cellular lives as an autocrat. Otherwise, each cell would act independently, as they do in decay when the ego has departed. It is evident that the fainter the consciousness of a cell, the easier it is to dominate, and the longer it will remain under control. Different kingdoms have different vehicles and, consequently, different levels of consciousness. The mineral kingdom has only a dense body and a consciousness comparable to the deepest trance. Therefore, It would be easiest to assimilate food taken directly from the mineral kingdom, and such food would remain in the body for a longer period, reducing the need for frequent eating. However, the human organism vibrates so rapidly that it is incapable of directly assimilating inert minerals. Salt and similar substances pass through the system quickly, without being assimilated at all. The air is filled with nitrogen, which we need to repair bodily waste. We breathe it into our system, yet we cannot assimilate it, nor can we assimilate any other mineral, until it has first been transmuted in nature's laboratory and incorporated into plants. Plants possess both a dense and vital body, enabling them to perform this work. Their consciousness is akin to a deep, dreamless sleep, making it easy for the ego to dominate plant cells and keep them in a suggestible state for a long time. This explains the great sustaining power of plant-based foods. In animal food, the cells have already undergone greater individuation, and because animals possess a desire body that gives them passionate nature, it follows that when we eat meat, it is more difficult to dominate these cells. They have an animal-like consciousness, similar to a dream state, and such particles will not remain subdued for long. This is why a meat-based diet requires larger quantities and more frequent meals compared to a diet of vegetables or fruits. If we were to take this a step further and consume the flesh of carnivorous animals, we would find ourselves perpetually hungry because the cells in such animals are highly individualized and thus seek their freedom much more rapidly. This principle is well illustrated by the cases of wolves, vultures, and cannibals who have become proverbial for their insatiable hunger. Furthermore, since the human liver is too small to handle even a conventional meat-based diet properly, it is clear that if a cannibal were to subsist entirely on human flesh, rather than using it as an occasional delicacy, they would soon perish. While an excess of carbohydrates, sugars, starches, and fats does little harm to the system, being expelled through the lungs as carbonic acid gas or through the kidneys and skin as water, an excess of meat is also burned, but it leaves behind poisonous uric acid. It is becoming increasingly recognized that the less meat we consume, the better it is for our well-being. It is natural to seek the best quality food, but all animal flesh contains the toxins of decomposition. Venous blood is filled with carbon dioxide and other harmful substances as it travels to the kidneys or skin pores to be expelled as urine or sweat. These repugnant substances are present in every part of the meat we consume, and by eating such food, we are filling our bodies with toxic poisons. Many diseases are directly linked to our consumption of meat. There is also ample evidence that a carnivorous diet promotes ferocity. The well-known savagery of predatory beasts and the cruelty of certain meat-eating Native American tribes serve as examples. Conversely, the immense strength and gentle nature of the ox, elephant, and horse demonstrate the effects of a plant-based diet in animals. Similarly, the peaceful vegetarian nations of the East provide irrefutable evidence against meat consumption. From the moment we adopt a vegetarian diet, we eliminate one of the greatest threats to health, namely, the putrefaction of meat particles trapped between the teeth. This is not a minor argument in favor of adopting a vegetarian lifestyle. Fruits, cereals, and vegetables are, by their very nature, slow to decay. Each particle contains an enormous amount of ether that keeps it alive and fresh for a long time. In contrast, the ether interpenetrating through plant-based foods is very small at first. However, many of them, far from being harmful, are actually highly antiseptic, particularly citrus fruits such as oranges, lemons, and grapefruits, not to mention the king of all antiseptics, the pineapple, which has often been used successfully as a cure for the dreaded diphtheria, which is merely another name for septic sore throat. Thus, instead of poisoning the digestive tract with putrefying elements as meat does, fruits cleanse and purify the system. Pineapple, in particular, is superior to pepsin, and no diabolical cruelty is involved in obtaining it. There are 2 salts in the body that are highly vital and represent the 12 signs of the zodiac. These salts are necessary for building the body, but they are not mineral salts as is commonly assumed. They are plant-based. Minerals lack a vital body, and assimilation only occurs through the vital body. Therefore, we must obtain these salts from the plant kingdom. Doctors claim to extract them, but they are unaware that the fire used in the process expels and destroys the plant's vital body in the same way that cremation treats our body, leaving only the mineral remains. Therefore, If we wish to replenish the supply of any salt in our body, we must obtain it from uncooked plants. For the sick, this is how it should be administered. However, we should not conclude that everyone should stop eating meat and live solely on raw plant life. At our current stage of evolution, very few can do so. We must be careful not to raise the vibrations of our bodies too quickly, because, to continue our work under present conditions, we must have a body suitable for the task. However, we should always keep this thought with us. In the skull, at the base of the brain, there is a flame that continuously burns in the medulla oblongata, at the head of the spinal cord. Like the fire on the altar of the tabernacle, it is of divine origin. This fire emits a humming sound like the buzzing of a bee, which is the keynote of the physical body. It is sounded by the archetype, which builds and consolidates that mass of cells known as our body. The fire burns high or low, bright or dim, depending on how we nourish it. There is fire in everything in nature, except in the mineral kingdom, which lacks a vital body, and therefore has no pathway for the entry of the spirit of life. We replenish this sacred fire partly through the solar forces that enter the vital body via the etheric counterpart of the spleen, and from there to the solar plexus, where it is colored and then carried upward through the blood. We also absorb fire from the living fire present in the uncooked foods we eat, thus assimilating it. Looking at meat consumption from an ethical perspective, it is against a higher conception to kill in order to eat. In ancient times, man hunted like a wild beast, crude and ruthless. Now he gets his meat from the butcher, where none of the nauseating sights of the slaughterhouse disturb him. If each person had to visit those bloody places, where horrors are enacted daily, just to satisfy a harmful and unnatural habit that causes more disease and suffering than even alcohol addiction, if each had to wield the bloody knife and plunge it into the quivering flesh of his victim, how much meat would we eat? Very little. To avoid doing this repulsive work ourselves, we force others to remain in that bloody enclosure, killing thousands of animals every day of the week, brutalizing them to such an extent that the law does not allow them to serve on a jury in a capital punishment case, for they have lost all regard for life. The animals we kill also cry out against this murder. A cloud of darkness and hatred hovers over the great slaughterhouse cities. The law protects cats and dogs from cruelty, and we are pleased when little squirrels in city parks come to take food from our hands. But as soon as there is money to be made from an animal's meat or skin, man disregards its right to live and becomes its most dangerous enemy, breeding and feeding it solely for profit, imposing suffering and hardship upon a fellow being for the sake of gold. We have a heavy debt to pay to the lower creatures, whom we should be mentoring, but instead are murdering. The great law that always works to correct abuses will, in time, relegate the habit of eating slaughtered animals to the trash heap of obsolete practices, just as cannibalism is now. A predator's nature is to eat any animal that crosses its path, and its organs are designed to require that diet for survival. However, everything is constantly evolving into something higher. In its early developmental stages, man resembled the beasts of prey in certain aspects. However, he is meant to become like God, and thus at some point he must cease destroying in order to begin creating. Meat consumption has in the past stimulated human ingenuity at a lower level and has served our evolution. But now we stand at the threshold of a new era where self-sacrifice and service will bring spiritual growth to humanity. The evolution of the mind will bring wisdom beyond our greatest conception, but before it is safe to entrust us with that wisdom, we must become as gentle as doves. Otherwise, we would be prone to using it for selfish and destructive purposes, making it an inconceivable threat to our fellow beings. To prevent this, adopting a vegetarian diet is necessary. We have been taught that there is no life in the universe but the life of God, that in Him we live, move, and have our being, that His life animates everything that exists. Thus we naturally understand that whenever we take life, we destroy the form built by God for His manifestation. The lower animals are evolving spirits with sensitivity. It is their desire for experience that drives them to build their various forms, and when we take their forms away, we deprive them of the opportunity to gain experience, hindering their evolution instead of assisting it. The day will come when we will feel a profound disgust at the idea of making our stomachs the burial ground for the corpses of slaughtered animals. All true Christians will refrain from eating meat out of pure compassion. They will realize that all life is the life of God, and causing suffering to any sentient being is wrong. In many places where the Bible speaks of meat, it is very clear that it is not referring to actual meat. The chapter in Genesis where food is first assigned to man states that he should eat from every tree and herb, from seeds, and they shall serve as food. The most evolved peoples throughout history have abstained from meat. For example, we see Daniel, a holy and wise man, pleading not to be forced to eat meat, but to be given pulse to eat instead, along with his companions. It is said that the children of Israel in the desert desired meat, and their God was angered with them. As a result, there is an esoteric meaning in the feeding of the multitude, where fish was used as food. However, looking purely from a material perspective, we can summarize our response by reiterating that one day we will stop eating meat and fish, just as we have overcome cannibalism. Any license granted in barbaric times will disappear in the future altruistic age, when more refined sensitivities have awakened us to a fuller awareness of the horrors involved in satisfying a carnivorous taste. The need for an attractive and balanced diet. In the most sublime of all prayers, Christ teaches us to pray for our daily bread. But under current modern conditions, how often do we receive a stone in place of bread? Here, because of our complex civilization, cold storage methods, and other abominations, our food is such that, in general, rather than nourishing the body as it should, it depletes us and makes us subject to various diseases. Indigestion is a very mild accusation of the food supply in most places where the public eats. Even in the home, what is placed on the table to nourish, sustain, and build the body in health is often just a disguise for food, masked under various condiments and seasonings as being tasty. We generally eat to please our palate rather than nourish our bodies. On the other hand, it cannot be denied that some people who declare themselves to be scientifically and sensibly trained in cooking declare themselves vegetarian and are very strict in their notions of how food should be prepared. They seem to completely disregard the fact that food can be made pleasing to the palate, as well as healthy and nutritious. There is no incompatibility between the requirements of proper cooking and the pleasure it gives to the palate. In fact, it can be said that if food is not cooked in such a way as to be pleasant to the palate, as well as healthy and nutritious, it is not fulfilling its purpose. The palate has been given to us so that we can enjoy our food, so that we can, so to speak, receive it joyfully and welcome it into our bodies, as this favors assimilation and nutrition. On the other hand, unpleasant food is detestable to the receiver and therefore is not as easy to assimilate. This fact must be kept in mind. What matters is not how much we eat, but how much we assimilate. It is possible that some who have been incorrectly instructed in the most important subject of nutrition have been told that legumes, such as peas and beans, will replace meat, and so they began to consume these vegetables in large quantities after discarding meat. It is perfectly true that beans contain more protein than meat, but the protein in beans is not assimilated as easily. There are heavy residues and uric acid in such foods, which must be taken into account. Unless counteracted by plenty of green vegetables, disastrous results are bound to follow. It is important to remember, however, that green vegetables should not be eaten in the same meal with heavy legumes. There are others who, after leaving a meat-based diet, begin to live on bread, potatoes, and similar starchy foods, with the result that they become malnourished and anemic. A satisfactory diet must be properly balanced in all aspects, and only to the extent that we study the necessary dietary system to keep our bodies in good health can we expect to achieve the desired results. Diet, like health, is determined individually, and no general standard can be established. At the same time, it can be stated without fear of error that the less meat we consume, the better our health will be in general. However, if we want to completely do without meat, it is absolutely essential that we study a food value chart so that we can get the necessary proteins from the vegetables we eat. No man can go to an ordinary table and get sufficient nutrition if he only eats the vegetables provided as accessories to meat. He must have beans, peas, nuts, and similar foods rich in proteins to take the place of meat, or he will starve. The role of stimulants in evolution, alcohol, which ferments outside the system, is being replaced by sugar, which ferments inside. In the past, a stimulant was indispensable to awaken the human spirit from the lethargy brought on by a meat diet. The bacchanals in the ancient temples which today fill us with horror, were then of immense value for human development. As sugar consumption increases, alcohol consumption decreases, and at the same time the moral level gradually rises. People become more altruistic and more akin to Christ in proportion to their use of the non-intoxicating stimulant. Therefore, the temperance movement is one of the most powerful factors in accelerating the coming of Christ. It is evident that evolutionary progress is elevating the lower kingdoms as well as humanity. Animals, particularly domesticated species, are approaching individualization, and their withdrawal from manifestation has already begun. As a result, in time, it will be impossible to obtain meat. Then, the bell will toll for the death of the king alcohol, as only meat-eaters long for liquor. Meanwhile, plant life is becoming more sensitive. The lateral branches of trees produce more abundantly than the vertical branches because in plants, as in us, consciousness results from the antagonistic activities of the currents of desire and vital force. The lateral members are dragged along their entire length by the currents of desire that surround our planet and act so powerfully on the horizontal spines of animals. The currents of desire awaken the dormant plant life in the lateral members to a degree of consciousness higher than that of the vertical branches, which are traversed longitudinally by the vital currents radiating from the center of the earth. Thus, over time, plants will also become too sensitive to be used as food, and another source will need to be sought. Today, we have considerable ability to work with mineral chemical substances, shaping them into houses, ships, and all external things that evidence our civilization. We are masters of minerals outside our bodies, but powerless to assimilate and use them within our system to build our organs, until plant life has transmuted crystals into crystalloids. Our work with minerals in the external world is raising their vibration and preparing the way for their direct inner use through spiritual alchemy. Through this, we will build the temple of the Spirit, conquer the dust from which we come, and qualify ourselves as true master masons prepared to work in higher spheres. Fasting as a means of healing and a factor for soul growth. We can easily conceive that there are more people in the West who die from overeating than from eating too little. In certain conditions, fasting for 1 or 2 days is undoubtedly beneficial. But just as there are epicures and gluttons, there are also others who go to the opposite extreme and fast excessively. Herein lies a great danger. The best approach is to eat in moderation and with the appropriate foods. In this way, fasting will not be necessary at all. If we study the chemistry of food, we will find that certain foods have valuable properties for the system in times of disorder. When taken appropriately, food is truly medicine. All citrus fruits, for example, are splendid antiseptics, thus preventing disease. All cereals, especially rice, are antitoxins, killing disease and the germs of putrefaction. Knowing these medicinal properties of different foods, we can easily ensure a supply of what we need to heal our ordinary ailments through food rather than through fasting. In ancient dispensations, sacrifices of bulls and goats were required as atonement for sin because man at that time valued his material possessions even more than today and felt the loss deeply when forced to give them up for such a purpose at the altar of sacrifices. Men were obliged to offer their prized possessions for every transgression, and God was presented as a harsh overseer whose displeasure was dangerous to incur. But there has always been an esoteric teaching, now promulgated exoterically, that does not accept the sacrifice of an animal, money, or other possessions, but instead demands that each person make a sacrifice of themselves. This was taught to aspirants in the ancient mystery schools when preparing them for the mystic rite of initiation. They were instructed in the mysteries of the vital body, how it is composed of 4 ethers, etc., etc. The aspirant was thoroughly taught the functions of the 2 lower ethers in comparison with the 2 higher ones. He knew that all purely animal functions of the body depended on the density of the lower ethers, and that the 2 higher ethers composed the body of duty, which was the vehicle of service. He naturally aspired to cultivate this glorious garment through self-abnegation and by restraining the propensities of the lower nature, as we do today. These facts were kept secret from the masses, as it has been said, or rather should have been, but some neophytes, with excessive zeal to attain their goals no matter how, forgot that it is only through service and selflessness that the golden wedding garment, composed of the 2 higher ethers, is cultivated. They thought the hidden maxim, gold in the crucible, forged in the fire, light as the winds, ever higher, only meant that as long as the lower nature, the dross, was expelled, it didn't matter how, and if they could find an easy method, they would leave only the gold composed of the two higher ethers, the vital body, in which they could enter the invisible world without hindrance. They reasoned that since the chemical ether is the agent of assimilation, it could be eliminated from the vital body by starving the physical vehicle. However, the results obtained by these misguided individuals and their followers were far from what was intended with the training in the mystery schools. There, the candidate was first taught that the body is the temple of God, and that profaning, destroying, or mutilating it in any way is a grave sin. Indulgence in appetite is a sin, a contaminating practice that brings with it some retribution, but it is no more reprehensible than the practice of fasting for soul growth. Right living is neither fasting nor overindulgence, but giving the body the necessary elements to maintain it in the proper condition of health, strength, and efficiency as an instrument of the spirit. Therefore, fasting for soul growth is a pseudo-method that has exactly the opposite effect from what it was designed to achieve by its short-sighted creators. The health value of indigestible foods may seem absurd at first glance, saying that the more indigestible our food is, the better our health will be. However, when the statement is slightly refined, it is true. Foods that are often labeled indigestible because they cause distress after eating actually cause problems because they have been digested too thoroughly, while other foods that are almost completely indigestible and thus in a sense not real food leave us with all the sensations of health and well-being. A lack of proper appreciation of these essential facts is at the root of the difficulties many people experience when they adopt what they are pleased to call a vegetarian diet. In most cases, people have suffered from digestive problems before stopping eating meat, and in many instances, they have adopted a meatless diet with the expectation that it would work miracles in restoring their health. As a result, they are often bitterly disappointed because they do not feel better. Moreover, in several cases, they may even feel worse because they continue their dietary mistakes in all other aspects. Thus, in many cases, their reformed diet is, from a health perspective, 1,000 times worse than the usual diet of the average person. And God knows that is quite bad. In fact, instead of being amazed that the body breaks down under the strain of dietary indiscretion, it is truly wonderful that it can withstand as well as it does despite the abuse and mistreatment it is subjected to. It is not uncommon for people who come to us for healing to admit, without shame, the most atrocious dietary mistakes, completely unaware that they are doing something wrong. They eat 4 or 5 times a day, consuming hot pastries, coffee, eggs, steak, white bread, potatoes, cake, cheese, etc., and then sincerely wonder why they don't feel well. These types of people will claim they don't have bad habits. They smoke a few cigarettes, drink a few glasses of beer, or maybe have 1 or 2 cocktails. They live what they call a natural diet, go to bed at 10 or 11, and pat themselves on the back, feeling like they are models of good behavior. Generally, when it is pointed out to them that they are making grave mistakes, they look on with total amazement and disbelief. They seem to doubt their senses when told that they are literally killing themselves with food. In truth, they are digging their grave with their teeth. However, this is absolutely true, and it is not so much because their food is indigestible, but because of the lack of indigestible materials mixed with the highly concentrated foods that form the main elements of such a diet. In this sense, such people are no worse than those who live on a diet of concentrated foods like prunes, nuts, raisins, etc. They also eat highly concentrated foods, obtaining both proteins from nuts and carbohydrates from raisins, but they lack the indispensable, though indigestible, cellulose to provide the necessary volume and cause the irritation in the digestive tract that is absolutely essential for inducing peristalsis and the secretion of necessary digestive enzymes. There is no doubt that whole wheat is much more nutritious, tasty, and healthy than white flour, which is composed only of the starchy parts of the grain. But its value for health is not especially great because it is easier to digest than white bread, since in fact it is not, and the great benefit derived from whole bread comes from the mineral salts needed for bodily development, which are absent in white bread. We must remember that just as part of the protein contained in meat and the phosphorus in fish remain undigested, the same happens with the proteins and phosphorus that abound in whole wheat bread. We do not assimilate all the proteins and mineral salts contained in the coarser parts of whole wheat, But while white bread is almost completely digested and leaves little ash, provided it is well made, of course, the coarser particles of whole wheat flour pass through the intestinal tract undigested. They massage, so to speak, and irritate, inducing a blood flow that keeps the intestines sweet and healthy. They do not pack as tightly as the small residues left from highly concentrated foods, and thus they carry with them the harmful gases in the air spaces, leaving the digestive tract pure and clean. Compare this action on the intestines with foods like eggs, meat, and cheese, which are almost completely assimilated and do not leave any thick volume to clean the intestines after digestion. After consuming meals with vegetables like legumes, turnips, carrots, celery, onions, etc., which contain all the elements found in meat and also the necessary mass for health composed of thick, fibrous material, they are the only foods that can sweep the intestinal tract, eliminate all harmful waste products, and leave the system in a healthy condition. The archetype determines the form and figure of a person, and this will be their normal state in health. However, due to our dietary disorder, we often change this, so the body's energy is used in the process of eliminating a huge amount of food that we cannot assimilate, and therefore we become thinner. The opposite happens when the elimination faculties are deficient. Then the leftover meat or fatty tissue from an unnatural diet causes weight gain. When a scientifically prepared diet is adopted, people who were too thin due to a previous poor diet gain weight. And conversely, those who had gained weight unnaturally stop doing so, and their weight decreases. Another fruitful cause of digestive disorders is the habit of eating every few hours. People who eat 5 or 6 times a day often claim they are hungry and must eat, or else they feel ill. In reality, this obsession is due to a sick condition of the stomach, and the relief comes from the weight of the food, which cushions the stomach. We call it criminal to give a person addicted to morphine more of it just because they crave it, and it would temporarily alleviate their suffering. We should apply the same logic and philosophy to people who poison themselves by overeating. This is not a theory, but the result of research that cannot be matched by experiments on animals or humans, where the inherent suffering of tabulating research results creates an unnatural digestive condition. There are no such barriers for someone whose spiritual sight is open and who can see the peristaltic action of the stomach and intestines when the system has been overloaded. Then, the food sweats a poisonous black gas that the vital body of the person expels through the periphery of the aura while the person enjoys good health. But when their vitality weakens and the flow of solar force through the vessel is not as strong as usual, this poisonous gas remains around the abdominal region as a wide black band, poisoning all the organic activities of the body while it is there. When a person eats 3 times a day, there is a small chance of dissolving the poison band generated by one meal before taking the next. But when meals are spaced only a few hours apart, there is absolutely no chance that the person will get rid of this poison cloud, and as a result, they worsen, shortening their natural lifespan in a way that would be a shocking surprise to most of these people if they realized it. For these reasons, anyone who wishes to obtain and maintain health must strive to eat only 2 or 3 times a day and in a spacious manner, ensuring an abundance of volume rather than nutrients. It is a real fact that many more people die from overeating than from undereating. Chapter 4. Astrology as an Aid to Healing. The astrological basis for healing is well known to the modern doctor. The condition of the blood, and thus the entire body, changes in sympathy with the state of the patient's mind. The more the doctor uses suggestion as an adjunct to medicine, the more success they have. Perhaps few would believe the fact that both our mental and physical condition are influenced by the planetary rays that change as the planets move. These days, since the principle of radioactivity has been established, we know that the entire world is affected by innumerable small particles in space. Wireless telegraphy has taught us that etheric waves travel quickly and widely through space and operate a key according to our will. We also know that the rays of the sun affect us differently in the morning when they strike horizontally than at noon when they are perpendicular. If the rapidly moving rays of sunlight produce physical changes, the slower rays of the planets can also have an effect. The persistent rays of these planets are health factors that should not be overlooked by a completely scientific healer. Therefore, we hold that results can be obtained more easily at certain times when the stellar rays are favorable for healing a particular disease, or for treatment with previously prepared remedies under auspicious conditions. If doctors studied the science of astrology, They could diagnose their patients' conditions with minimal effort in a way that is totally impossible from the perspective of ordinary diagnosis. Some doctors are waking up to this fact and have discovered through their experiences that celestial bodies have an influence on the human frame. For example, when the writer was in Portland, Oregon, a doctor mentioned in his observation that whenever he was able to perform an operation while the moon was waxing, that is, moving from new to full, the operation was always successful and no complications arose. On the other hand, he had found that when circumstances forced him to perform an operation as the moon passed from full to dark, there was a great danger of problems, and such operations were never as satisfactory as those performed while the moon was waxing. The way to find out the peculiarities of the spirit that resides in the patient's body is to cast their horoscope to see when the times are favorable for administering medication, giving the proper herbs at the right time. Paracelsus did this, and that's why he was always successful with his patients. He was never wrong. Today there are those who use astrology for this purpose. The writer, for example, has used it this way in diagnosis in many cases, and has always been able to see the crises in the patient's condition, past, present, and future, and thus has been able to provide much relief to those suffering from various diseases. Astrology should be used in this way and not degraded into fortune-telling for gold, because, like all spiritual sciences, it must be used for the benefit of humanity, regardless of mercantile considerations. There are 7 spheres, the planets of our solar system. Each one has its own keynote and emits a sound that differs from those of the other planets. One or several of them vibrate in particular harmony with the seed atom of the ego seeking to incarnate. This planet corresponds to the tonic in the musical scale. Although the tones of all the planets are necessary to build a complete organism, each one is modified and made to conform to the basic impact given by the most harmonious planet, which is therefore the ruler of that life. Just like in earthly music, in celestial music there are harmonies and discords, and all of them affect the seed atom and help construct the archetype. Thus, vibrational lines of force are formed, which later attract and arrange the physical parts, just as the sand spores are arranged into geometric shapes when a brass plate is tilted with a violin bow. Along these archetypal lines of vibration, the physical body is later constructed, expressing precisely the harmony of the spheres as it was interpreted during the building period. This period, however, is much longer than the actual gestation period and varies according to the complexity of the structure required by the life-seeking physical manifestation. The process of building the archetype is not continuous because, under aspects of the planets that produce notes to which the vibratory powers of the seed atom cannot respond, it simply hums over the ones it has already learned. Thus it waits for a new sound that it can use to build more of the organism it desires to express. Therefore, seeing that the earthly organism that each of us inhabits is shaped along the vibrational lines produced by the song of the spheres, we can realize that the disharmonies that express themselves as disease are produced primarily by the disharmony. The disharmony of the disease will disappear shortly. This information is provided by the birth horoscope, as there each planet in its house and sign expresses harmony or discord, health or disease. Therefore, all healing methods are suitable only insofar as they take into account the stellar harmonies and discords expressed in the wheel of life, the horoscope. While the laws of nature that govern the lower realms are all-powerful in ordinary circumstances, there are higher laws belonging to the spiritual realms that, under certain conditions, can replace the former. For example, the forgiveness of sins, after their recognition and true repentance, serves to replace the law that demands an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. When Christ walked on this earth and healed the sick, he, being the Lord of the Sun, incarnated in himself the synthesis of the stellar vibrations as the octave. He embodied all the tones of the scale, and therefore could emit from himself the true planetary corrective influence required in each case. He perceived the disharmony, and immediately knew how to compensate for it. By virtue of his exalted development, he needed no additional preparation but achieved immediate results by substituting harmony for the planetary discord that was causing the illness he was treating. Only in one case did he resort to the higher law and said, "Rise, your sins are forgiven." In the same way, the ordinary methods used in the Rosicrucian healing system depend on the knowledge of disharmonies. This has been sufficient in all cases we have knowledge of so far. However, there is a more powerful method available under a higher law that can accelerate recovery in long-standing cases and, under certain circumstances, where there is sincere and heartfelt recognition of the wrong, can even erase the effects of the disease before cold and harsh fate decrees it. When we look spiritually at a sick person, whether or not the physical body is emaciated, it is clearly evident to the seer that the finer vehicles are much more tenuous than during health. Therefore, they do not transmit to the physical body an adequate share of vitality, and as a consequence, that instrument becomes more or less disturbed. But whatever the state of emaciation of the rest of the physical body, certain centers, which are subtle during health to a degree that varies with the spiritual development of the individual, become obstructed to an increasing degree depending on the severity of the illness. This is particularly true in the main center between the eyebrows. There, the spirit is sometimes immersed to such an extent that it loses contact with the outer world and its progress, and focuses so deeply on its own condition that only the complete breakdown of the physical body can release it. This process can take many years, and in the meantime, the planetary disharmony that caused the initial illness may have passed, but the patient is unable to take advantage of the improved conditions. In such cases, a special spiritual force is required to deliver the soul its message. Your sins are forgiven. Once this has been heard, the patient can respond to the command, "Take up your bed and walk." None of the members of present humanity can approach the stature of Christ, and therefore none can exert his power in such extreme cases. But the need for that power in active manifestation exists today, as much as it did 2,000 years ago. The Spirit impregnates our planet, but to varying degrees. It has more affinity with some substances than with others. Being an emanation of the Christ principle, it is the universal spirit that composes the spirit of the world of life, which restores the synthetic harmony of the body. The laws of compatibility and systemic receptivity. There are two basic laws in the science of astrotherapy, or healing through the use of the stellar ray. One is the law of compatibility, and the other is the law of systemic receptivity. Through the knowledge and intelligent application of these laws, the sick recover much more quickly than otherwise, with minimal effort on the part of the healer. At the time of conception, the moon was in the degree it ascends at the moment of birth, or its opposite. The vital body was then placed in the mother's womb as a matrix in which the chemical elements that form our dense body are built. The vital body emits a sound similar to the hum of a bumblebee. During life, these etheric sound waves attract and place the chemical elements of our food so that they form organs and tissues. While the etheric sound waves of our vital body are in harmony with the keynote of the archetype, the chemical elements with which we nourish our dense body are arranged appropriately, and health prevails, regardless of whether we are robust or thin, with a rosy or sallow complexion, or whatever our external appearance may be. However, at the moment when the sound waves of the vital body vary from the keynote of the archetype, this dissonance places the chemical elements of our food in a way that is incongruent with the force lines of the archetype. Then imperfect elimination of waste, the accumulation of poison in the system, abnormal growths, and other conditions manifest in the dense body, and the disease continues until harmony is restored in the vital body. When the invisible cause has been eliminated, the visible effects disappear and health is restored. Thus we see that the incipient disease manifests in the vital body before the dense body begins to show signs of incapacity, and the recovery of the vital body also precedes convalescence. When a healthy person suffers an accident, their vital body is not damaged. Therefore, they may not feel the full extent of the injury until several days later. If they survive the shock of maximum dissonance between the vital body and the archetype, the chances of recovery are good. The tone of the etheric vibration in the vital body is determined by the rising sign. For the reason stated, each of the 12 signs imparts a different sound from the rest. Just as each of the 12 signs of the chromatic scale varies from the others, some notes blend harmoniously and with a pleasant effect, while others are fundamentally discordant and jarring to our sensitivity. In the same way, the harmony of their rising signs makes some people pleasant and capable of helping and healing one another when necessary, while those whose rising signs are in disharmony cannot help themselves or receive help from others. The first consideration when undertaking a case is to discover the basic spiritual relationship between the healer and the patient. If the law of compatibility shows harmony, the outlook is good for a quick recovery. But when disharmony appears, the patient must be delivered to a doctor or healer with whom they are in agreement. This is the method that the Elder Brothers use to distribute patients among the invisible helpers, and it is the key to the success we have had in benefiting all those who have requested help. Astrological elements. Astrologically, there are 4 elements: fire, air, earth, and water. The planets are focal points through which the influences of the signs are projected onto the newborn and tone the body, especially if they are located in the ascendant. The success of the healer varies in proportion to their constitution, which aligns with the ascendant sign of the patient, whether it is fire, earth, air, or water. When Saturn in a person's horoscope occupies any degree of the zodiac included in the house of another, those people are mutually incompatible and unable to confer benefits. Mars and Uranus also have a malign effect, but their force dissipates quickly. It can be compared to the snap of a terrier, whereas the influence of Saturn is like the closed jaws of a bulldog, a strangling grip, a death hold from which there is no release. The Sun is the great reservoir of life, the opposite of Saturn. Therefore, we can easily see that its position would mark someone as particularly beneficial for certain types of cases and certain diseases. This influence is determined by its position according to the triplicity. Thus, those with the Sun in one of the fire signs have great healing power regarding people suffering from diseases ruled by these signs. Those with the Sun in air signs have power over the habitual diseases of the air signs, etc. Those born under the cardinal sign of a particular triplicity have more success in treating acute cases of diseases belonging to those 3 signs. Those with the Sun in a fixed sign are apt at healing chronic diseases of that triplicity. Those born with the Sun in common signs are the least successful healers, but they have more power to soothe the sick and often bring recovery through their calming influence on the patient's nerves. Therefore, they are the best nurses for patients under their triplicity, especially when there are mental issues or when physical illness is the result of mental unrest. Thus, people born when the Sun was in one of the fire signs, Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, have particular success in treating the head, heart, spinal cord, femoral region, fevers, etc. Those born in April with the Sun in Aries would be the best for treating acute cases of these ailments. Those born in August with the Sun in Leo would succeed in chronic cases where others would fail. And if these healers have a nurse with the Sun in Sagittarius, she would help them in all their cases like no one else could. The same applies to the other triplicities. Influence of the Moon in healing. The Moon is the celestial orb that makes everything happen. Everything that is predicted by all the other planets never reaches fruition until the Moon brings it to a climax. In the human body, there is a flow and ebb, a tide just as in the outside world. There are critical periods in certain diseases that can be precisely measured by the Moon. Therefore, it is important that everyone understands the influence of this unusual planet. There is a cosmic force that culminates at the new moon, and another at the time when the moon is full. Everything that is set in motion from the moment of the new moon to the full moon increases in intensity and finally culminates when the moon is full. This period marks the flow of life that comes from the Sun and is reflected to us through the moon. This force is a great help in building and maintaining the body in a healthy condition. From the full moon to the new moon, this great force of light becomes darker, and everything that has come to a focus begins to fade away and gradually dies. Knowing that the moon has these 2 influences, depending on whether it is waxing or waning, we find that when applying treatment, they must be taken into account. All treatments, like medications, can be divided into 2 general classes: stimulants and sedatives. The first class has a clearly better effect and is more easily applied during the waxing moon, while the other is much more effective and used during the waning moon. The general rule is that from the new moon to the full moon, stimulants produce the greatest effect, and sedatives are weaker. The dose of stimulants should be reduced, and that of sedatives increased. The exception is when the waxing moon approaches a conjunction with Saturn. Give higher doses of stimulants and lower doses of sedatives. When the waxing moon approaches a conjunction with Mars and Mercury, stimulants are at their peak and sedatives at their minimum effect. When the waxing moon is in good aspect with Jupiter and Venus, cardiac stimulation produces the most lasting results. Palpitations are treated more effectively when the moon is waning and favorably aspects the aforementioned planets. Apply cardiac stimulants with extreme caution when the moon aspects these planets unfavorably, especially when it is dark. Anesthetics are also more likely to produce fatal results at this time. If we inhibit the functioning of the vagus nerve to some extent, it alters the action of the heart. Thus, we are applying what would be the equivalent of a sedative in medicine. Manipulating this nerve in a way that stimulates its action is the application of the equivalent of a medical stimulant. Planetary polarities. When studying magnetism, we are dealing with an invisible force. Ordinarily, we can at best say how it manifests in the physical world. The physical world is the world of effects. The causes are hidden from our view, although they are closer than our hands or feet. The force is around us, invisible, and is only seen by the effects it produces. For example, if we take a plate of water and let it freeze, we will see a myriad of ice crystals, beautiful geometric figures. These show the lines along which the water froze, and these lines are force lines that were present before the water froze, but they were invisible until the proper conditions were provided for them to manifest. In the same way, there are force lines between the poles of a magnet. They are not seen or felt until we bring iron or iron filings to the place where they are, and then they will manifest. By arranging the filings in an orderly pattern, we create the right conditions for any of nature's forces to show their effects, moving our cars off the street, sending messages with the speed of light over thousands of miles, etc. But the force itself is always invisible. We know that magnetism always travels at right angles to the electric current from which it manifests. We know the difference between the manifestation of electric current and magnetic current, both of which are so dependent on each other. However, we have never seen either of the two, though they are the most valuable servants we have today. Magnetism can be divided into mineral and animal magnetism. Although they are actually one and the same, the first has very little influence on animal tissues, while the second is generally ineffective when working with minerals. Mineral magnetism is derived directly from the mother stones that are used to magnetize iron. This process gives the metal thus treated the property of attracting iron. However, this type of magnet is used very little, as its magnetism depletes quickly. It is too weak in proportion to its volume, and mainly because the magnetic force cannot be controlled in a magnet called permanent. The electromagnet is also a mineral magnet. It is simply a piece of iron wrapped with many turns of wire, and the strength of the magnet varies depending on the number of turns of wire and the strength of the electric current passing through it. Electricity surrounds us in a diffuse state, useless for industrial purposes until it is compressed and forced through electrical wires by powerful electromagnets. We must have magnetism in the first place before we can obtain any electricity. Before starting up a new electric generator, the fields, which are nothing more than electromagnets, must be magnetized. If this is not done, they can be rotated at any speed they want and never light a single lamp or move a grain of weight. Everything depends on the magnetism being in place first. Once this magnetism is set in motion, it will leave a bit of energy when the generator is turned off, and this so-called residual magnetism will be the core of the force that will accumulate every time the generator is turned on again. All bodies of plants, animals and humans are nothing but transformed minerals. They all come from the mineral kingdom initially, and the chemical analysis of the bodies of plants, animals and humans undeniably reveals this fact. Furthermore, we know that plants get their sustenance from the mineral soil, and both animals and humans are consuming minerals when they eat plants as food. Even when humans eat animals, they are still eating mineral compounds, and therefore they obtain both the mineral substances and the magnetic force contained in them. This force is manifested in hemoglobin, or the red coloring matter of the blood, which attracts the life-giving oxygen when it comes into contact with it in the millions of tiny capillaries in the lungs, separating from it just as easily when passing through the capillaries throughout the body that connect the arteries with the veins. What is this due to? To understand this, we need to take a closer look at how magnetism manifests, as seen in industrial uses. In a generator or motor, there are always two fields or multiples of two fields, each field or magnet alternating between the North Pole and the South Pole. If we want to run two or more generators in parallel and force electricity through the same wire, the first requirement is that the magnetic current in the magnetic fields must flow in the same direction. If this were not the case, they would not work together, and would generate currents flowing in opposite directions, blowing their fuses. This happens because the poles of a generator, which should have attracted each other, repel each other, and vice versa. The remedy is to switch the ends of the wire that magnetizes the field, so that the magnetic current of one generator will be like that of the other, and both will run together without any problems. Similar conditions prevail in magnetic healing. A certain vibratory tone and magnetic polarity were infused into each of us when the stellar forces passed through our bodies and gave us our planetary baptism the moment we first breathed fully. These are modified during our journey through life, but in general, their initial impulse remains unchanged, and therefore the birth horoscope remains the most vital power in life to determine our likes and dislikes, as well as all other matters. Moreover, their pronouncements are more reliable than our conscious likes and dislikes. Sometimes we can meet a person and learn to love them, even though we have the feeling that they exert a negative influence over us that we cannot explain, and therefore we try to put it aside. However, a comparison of their horoscope with ours will reveal the reason, and if we are wise, we will heed the warning, or just as surely as the stars that revolve around the sun, we will live to regret our failure to pay attention to this writing on the wall. But there are also many cases where we do not perceive the antipathy between ourselves and a certain person, even though the horoscope reveals it. When we see the signs by comparing the two horoscopes, we may feel inclined to trust our feelings more than the stellar script of the horoscopes. This will also bring us problems over time, as the planetary polarity will inevitably manifest unless both parties are sufficiently evolved to govern their stars. Such people are few and far between in our current stage of evolution. Therefore, it would be wise for us to use our knowledge of stellar writing to compare our horoscopes with those who, at least, come intimately into our lives. This can save both them and us much misery and distress. We especially recommend this procedure in relation to a healer and their patients, and in relation to a possible marriage partner. When someone is sick, their resistance is at its lowest point, and therefore they are less able to resist external influences. Thus, the vibrations of the healer have a virtually unlimited effect, and although they may be motivated by the most noble altruistic motives, desiring to pour their own life out for the benefit of the patient, if their stars were adverse at birth, their vibratory tone and magnetism are destined to have a hostile effect on the patient. Therefore, it is imperative that any healer have knowledge of astrology and the law of compatibility, whether they belong to those who certainly heal through magnetism and laying on of hands, or the regular school of doctors. For the latter also infuse their vibrations into the patient's aura, and help or hinder, depending on the harmony of their planetary polarity with that of the patient. What has been said about the healer applies 10 times more strongly to the nurse, as they are with the patient almost all the time, and the contact is much more intimate. For the healer, the nurse, and the patient, compatibility is determined by the rising sign, the house and the 6th house. If their rising signs match in nature, such that all have fire rising signs or all have earth, air, or water rising signs, they are harmonious. However, if the patient has a water rising sign, a nurse or doctor with fire signs will have a detrimental effect. It is also necessary to see that Saturn in the nurse's or healer's horoscope is not placed in any of the degrees of the zodiac within the 6th house of the patient. Chapter 5. The therapeutic basis of light, color, and sound. God is light. Every time we immerse ourselves in these 3 words, we immerse ourselves in a spiritual source of inexhaustible depth, and every time we immerse ourselves in the divine depths, we draw closer to our Father in heaven. Each year that passes, with the help of the largest telescopes that the ingenuity and mechanical skill of man have been able to construct to pierce the depths of space, it becomes more evident that the infinitude of light teaches us the infinitude of God. Indeed, God is one and indivisible. He encompasses within his being everything that is, just as white light encompasses all colors. But it appears triply in manifestation, as white light refracts into 3 primary colors, blue, yellow, and red. Wherever we see these colors, they are emblematic of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. These 3 primary rays of divine life diffuse or radiate through the sun and produce life, consciousness, and form on each of the 7 bearers of light, the planets, which are called the 7 spirits before the throne. Their names are Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus. Each of the 7 planets receives light from the Sun to varying degrees, depending on its proximity to the central orb and the constitution of its atmosphere. The beings of each of these planets, depending on the state of their development, have an affinity for some of the solar rays, absorbing the colors or the colors that are congruent with them and reflecting the rest onto the other planets. This reflected ray carries with it an impulse from the nature of the beings with which it has been in contact. Thus, the light and divine life reach each planet either directly from the Sun or reflected from their 6 planetary brothers. And just as the summer breeze that has blown over blooming fields carries on its silent, invisible wings the mixed fragrance of a multitude of flowers, so too do the subtle influences of God's garden bring us the mixed impulses of all the spirits, and in that multicolored light we live and move and have our being. The rays directly from the Sun produce spiritual illumination. The reflected rays from other planets increase consciousness and moral development, while the rays reflected through the Moon provide physical growth. However, just as each planet can only absorb a certain amount of one or more colors, depending on the general state of evolution in which it finds itself, so too each being on Earth, whether mineral, plant, animal, or human, can only absorb and develop with a certain amount of the various rays projected onto the Earth. The rest does not affect them or produce any sensation, just as the blind are unaware of the light and color that exist everywhere around them. The white light of the Sun contains the 7 colors of the spectrum. The occultist even sees 12 colors, with 5 existing between red and violet, moving in one direction around the circle, in addition to the red, orange, yellow, green, etc., of the visible spectrum. 4 of these colors are quite indescribable, but the 5th, the middle one of the 5, is similar to the hue of a freshly blown peach blossom. It is in fact the color of the vital body. Trained clairvoyants who describe it as bluish-gray or reddish-gray, etc., are trying to describe a color that has no equivalent in the physical world, and therefore they are forced to use the closest descriptive terms available in our language. When the 3 primary colors intermingle, 4 additional colors appear, the 3 secondary colors, orange, green, purple, each due to the mixture of 2 primary colors and an indigo color, which contains the full range of colors, making a total of the 7 colors of the spectrum. Red plus yellow gives orange, blue plus yellow gives green, and blue plus red gives purple. The color of Mars is red, Venus is yellow, Mercury is violet, the Moon is green, the Sun is orange, Jupiter is blue, Saturn is indigo, and Uranus is yellow. We can mix these colors to obtain help from them. In fact, it is the complementary color seen in the world of desire that produces the effect of physical colors. If you wish to calm someone whose Mars is too prominent, the gems, colors, and metals of Saturn will help. But if we want to assist someone who is moody and taciturn, we can use the gems, colors, and metals of Mars to advantage. In the physical world, red tends to excite and energize, while green has a refreshing and calming effect. But the opposite is true when we view the matter from the perspective of the world of desire. There, the complementary color is active and has the effect on our desires and emotions that we attribute to the physical color. We speak of the jealousy engendered by impure love as the monster with green eyes. When observing the auras of people, the trained clairvoyant notes the scarlet of anger, the gray and steel blue of fear, the dark blue of worry, the red cloud of hatred, the black veil of despair, etc. A soft sky blue tint indicates hope, optimism, and a budding religious feeling. Blue shows the highest type of spirituality, but blue does not appear outside the dense body, except in the greatest saints. There, it is usually only observed in yellow. Among the lower races, the base color of the aura is a dull red, like the color of a fire burning slowly, indicating their passionate and emotional nature. When examining individuals who are on a slightly higher rung of the evolutionary ladder, the basic color or vibration they radiate is an orange hue, yellow of intellect, mixed with the red of passion. The natural golden color is the Christ ray, which finds its chemical expression in oxygen, a solar element. As we advance along the path of evolution, those who are not religious professionals acquire a golden tint in their auras due to the higher altruistic impulses more common in the West. There exists an intimate connection between color and tone. When a particular note is played, a specific color simultaneously appears. In the celestial world, color and sound are present, but tone is the originator of color. Pythagoras spoke of the harmony of the spheres and did not use that expression simply as a poetic allusion. There is such harmony, as John tells us. In the beginning was the Word, and without it nothing was made that was made. That was the creative fiat that gave rise to the world. We hear of the celestial music because, from the point of view of the celestial world, everything is created first in terms of sound, which then shapes matter into the multitudinous forms we see around us. Rhythmic and ordered sound is the builder of all that is, the creator and sustainer of all form. In the occultist's field of vision, the entire solar system is a vast musical instrument, spoken of in Greek mythology as Apollo's seven-stringed lyre, the radiant sun god. Just as there are 12 semitones in the chromatic scale, there are 12 signs of the zodiac in the heavens, and just as we have 7 whole notes or keys on the piano keyboard, we have 7 planets. It can be said that the zodiac signs are the resonating box of the cosmic harp, and the 7 planets are the strings. They emit different sounds as they pass through the various signs, thereby influencing humanity in diverse ways. If harmony fails for even a moment, if there is the slightest discord in that celestial band, the entire universe as such must crumble. For music can destroy and build. This has been well demonstrated by great musicians. For example, the grandson of the immortal Felix Mendelssohn has spent several years experimenting with the power of sound in this direction. He has concluded that once we find the key note of a building, bridge, or other structure, we can destroy it by playing that note loudly and continuously. Thus, our proud smiles from the past. When listening to the story of Joshua and the walls of Jericho, it is clear that the sound of the ram's horn undoubtedly struck the keynote of those walls, which had been sensitized by the rhythmic march of his army in preparation for this final climax. The rhythmic march of many feet will destroy any bridge, and for this reason, soldiers are instructed to break step when crossing a bridge. Thus, we can say that each planet emits a keynote, which is the total sum of all the sounds within it, mixed and harmonized by the resident planetary spirit. This sound can be heard by the ear of the spirit, as Goethe says. The sun sings its ancient song, the rival song of the sister spheres. Its prescribed course quickens along its resounding way through the years. The sound for the ear of the spirit proclaims, "The day of the newborn is here. The rocky gates creak. The wheels of Phoebus roll, singing, what an intense sound brings the light." Invisible sonic vibrations have great power over physical matter. They build and destroy. If a small amount of very fine dust is placed on a brass or glass plate and a bow is drawn along its edge, the vibrations will cause the dust to form beautiful geometric shapes. The human voice can also produce these shapes, always the same figure for the same tone. If a note or chord is played in succession on a musical instrument, a piano, or preferably a violin, as it can produce more tonal gradations, a tone will be reached that will make the listener feel a distinct vibration at the back of the lower part of the head. Each time that note is played, the vibration will be felt. This note is the key note of the person it affects. If played loudly and long enough, it will kill just as effectively as a bullet from a gun. Conversely, if played slowly and quietly, it will strengthen and rest the body, tone the nerves, and restore health. Chapter 6. Sleep and Health. The value of sleep during the day. The vital body specializes the colorless solar fluid surrounding us through the organ we call the vessel. This vitality permeates the entire body and is seen by the clairvoyant as a pale pink fluid. Having been transmuted upon entering the physical body, it flows along all the nerves, and when sent by the brain, centers in particularly large quantities, it moves the muscles to which the nerves lead. It can be said that the vital body is formed by points protruding in all directions, inward, outward, upward, and downward throughout the body, with each tiny point passing through the center of one of the chemical atoms, causing it to vibrate at a speed greater than its natural one. This vital body continues until death in all conditions, except when, for example, blood circulation stops in a particular part, like when we rest our hand on the edge of a table for some time and it falls asleep, as we say. If we are clairvoyant, we can see the etheric hand as a glove, and the chemical atoms of the hand return to their slow, natural rhythm of vibration. When we slap the hand to wake it up, the peculiar tingling sensation we feel is caused by the points of the vital body re-entering the dormant atoms of the hand and setting them into renewed vibration. The vital body leaves the dense body in a similar way when a person is dying. Those who have been revived after drowning experience intense agony due to the entry of these points, which feel like a tingling sensation. During the day, when the solar fluid is absorbed by the human being in large quantities, these points of the vital body are blown, or stretched, so to speak, by the vital fluid. But as the day progresses and the poisons of decay obstruct the physical body more and more, the vital fluid flows more slowly. At night, there comes a time when the points of the vital body do not receive a full supply of the vivifying fluid. They wither, and the atoms of the body move more slowly. Consequently, the ego feels the body as heavy, sluggish, and tired. Eventually, there comes a time when, so to speak, the vital body collapses, and the vibrations of the dense atoms become so slow that the ego can no longer move the body. It is forced to withdraw so that its vehicles can recover. Then we say that the body is asleep. However, sleep is not an inactive state. If it were, there would be no difference in sensation in the morning or any restorative power in sleep. The very word restoration implies activity. When a building has deteriorated from constant wear and tear and needs renovation and restoration, the tenants move out to allow the workers to do their job. For similar reasons, the ego leaves its dwelling at night, just as the workers work on the building to make it fit for reoccupation. Treating disease during sleep. It has been asked whether a person can be influenced in natural sleep, as in hypnotic sleep, or if there is a difference. Yes, there is a difference. In natural sleep, the ego, clothed in the mind and the body of desires, positions itself outside the physical body, generally hovering over it, or at least remaining near it, connected by the silver cord, while the vital and dense bodies rest on the bed. It is possible to influence the person by instilling thoughts and ideas into their brain that we wish to communicate. However, we cannot make them do anything or entertain any ideas that do not align with their natural inclinations. It is impossible to command them to do something in obedience, just as when they have been expelled by the passes of the hypnotist. It is the brain that moves the muscles, and during natural sleep, their brain is interpenetrated. The hypnotist's passes have expelled the ether from which their vital body is composed, outside the brain to the shoulders of the victim, where it remains around the neck and resembles the neck of a Yersi. The dense brain is then open to the ether of the hypnotist's vital body, which displaces that of the owner. Thus, in hypnotic sleep, the victim has no choice in the ideas that come to them or the movements they make with their body. But in ordinary sleep, they remain free agents. In fact, this method of suggestion during sleep is something that mothers will find extremely beneficial in treating refractory children, as if the mother sits by the child's bed, takes their hand, and speaks as she would when awake, instilling in their brain ideas of the nature she wishes them to have. She will find that, upon waking, many of these ideas will have taken root. This method is also effective when dealing with a sick person or someone addicted to alcohol. If the mother, nurse, or others use this method, they will find that it is possible to instill hope and healing, materially favoring recovery and aiding self-control. The effect of hypnotic sleep, from the occultist's point of view, is clearly flawed when attempting to cure a bad habit, such as drunkenness through hypnosis. Viewed from the perspective of life, methods such as those employed by the healers of the Emmanuel movement, etc., undoubtedly produce immense amounts of good. The patient is seated in a chair, made to sleep, and certain so-called suggestions are given. The person wakes up, cured of their bad habit of being a drunkard, and becomes a respectable citizen who cares for his wife and family. At first glance, the good seems undeniable, but if we look at it from the deeper perspective of the occultist, who sees this life as one among many, and consider the effect it has on the invisible vehicles of the person, the situation is very different. When a person is put into a hypnotic sleep, the hypnotist makes passes that have the effect of expelling the ether from the head of their dense body and replacing it with the hypnotist's ether. The person is then under the perfect domination of another. They have no free will, and therefore the so-called suggestions are in reality commands that the victim has no choice but to obey. Furthermore, when the hypnotist withdraws their ether and awakens the victim, they are able to eliminate all the ether they have inserted. To use a metaphor, it's like a small part of the magnetism infused into an electric dynamo before it can be started for the first time. It stays behind and remains as residual magnetism to excite the dynamo's fields each time it is started. Similarly, a small part of the ether from the hypnotist's vital body remains in the oblongata of the victim, a club that the hypnotist keeps over them for life. It is due to this fact that the suggestions made after the victim awakens are invariably followed. Therefore, the victim of a hypnotic healer does not overcome the bad habit by their own strength, but is as chained in that aspect as if they were in solitary confinement. And although in this life they may appear to be a better citizen, when they return to earth in another incarnation, they will have the same weakness and will have to struggle until they finally overcome it. Protective influence. There are methods to protect oneself from hostile influences, and it is better to be informed about the things that threaten us so we can take the necessary precautions to face emergencies. When we live lives of purity, when our days are filled with service to God and our fellow beings, with thoughts and actions of the highest nobility, we create for ourselves the golden armor that is a radiant force for good. No evil can penetrate this armor, for evil acts like a boomerang returning to the one who sent it, bringing upon them the evil they wished for others. It is a fact that an auric atmosphere surrounds every human being. We know that we often feel the presence of a person we cannot see, and we feel it because this atmosphere exists outside our dense bodies. This is gradually changing, and little by little it is becoming more and more golden in the West. As we move closer to the sun, this golden color, the color of Christ and Christ-like beings, the saints depicted by painters with a halo, increases. Gradually we become more like him, and this soma, the soul's subtle body, is taking form, preparing as our wedding garment. But sadly, none of us are entirely good. We know too well the war between the flesh and the spirit. We cannot hide from the fact that, like Paul, the good that I would I do not, and the evil which I would not that I do too often. Our good intentions come to nothing, and we do evil because it is easier. Therefore, we all have the kernel of evil within ourselves, which provides the opening sesame for the forces of evil to work. For this reason, it is better not to expose ourselves unnecessarily in places where seances with invisible spirits are held, no matter how good their teachings may seem to the uninitiated. We should not even participate as spectators in hypnotic demonstrations, for there, too, a negative attitude exposes one to the danger of obsession. At all times, we must heed Paul's advice and put on the full armor of God. We must be positive in our struggle for good against evil, and never miss the opportunity to assist our older brothers, in word or deed, in the great war for spiritual supremacy. Chapter 7, Mind and Healing, the true cause of contagion. Many people of a proud nature are always ready to make a joke at the expense of those who practice methods of divine healing that teach cultivating a fearless mental attitude in all conditions. But in reality, a large percentage of our illnesses are caused and can be attributed to feelings of fear by the patient. Travelers who have visited uninhabited islands report that the birds and beasts there initially had no fear of them, but soon learned of man's predatory nature and fled, fearing for their lives. Yes, the ruthless nature of man has spread fear throughout the earth in past times. We have conquered, domesticated, and exploited both birds and beasts, and what we have not been able to conquer, we have killed, so that everything that breathes hides in fear of us. Among the larger animals, none is so big that it does not fear us and flee from us. When we turn to the smaller things, the case is different. The man who believes he reigns on earth because he has made all of creation fear him, in turn, trembles before the tiny things of the world, and the smaller they are, the more he fears them. The microscope. We are told that a creature as small as the housefly carries thousands of parasites on the hairs of its legs. Thus, fear drives us to spend millions of dollars on flypaper, mosquito nets, fly traps, and other devices to rid ourselves of this plague. But our efforts are largely in vain, as despite spending large sums of money each year to exterminate the fly, it is so prolific that it reproduces faster than we can kill it. We fear even more its cousin, the mosquito. The microscope tells us that this tiny insect is one of the main messengers of the angel of death, which is why we fight it, fearing for our lives. Yet it thrives despite the enormous sums spent annually to eradicate it. Then there's the milk we drink. Under normal conditions, it is said that there are 100,000 germs per cubic centimeter, but even under the best and most sanitary conditions, this army of destroyers can be reduced to 10,000. That is why, with fear and trembling, we pasteurize this liquid before daring to give it to the very young. Every drop of water we drink teems with life from germs, says the microscope. Even the money we use to buy the necessities of life is a vehicle of death, as it is infected with germs to an almost incredible extent. At one point, we tried to bleach them, but it was discovered that bankers could not easily detect counterfeits after washing them, so we abandoned the process. Perhaps we fear counterfeiters more than germs, or love money more than health. Is not all this attitude ridiculous and unworthy of our high and noble state as human beings? As children of God, it is well known by science that an attitude of fear breaks the body's resistance, thereby exposing it to diseases that would otherwise not be able to gain a foothold. From the occult perspective, it is perfectly clear why this happens. The dense body we see with our eyes is interpenetrated by and assimilates this universal ether. In the solar plexus, it becomes a pink fluid that permeates the nervous system and can be compared to electricity in the wires of an electrical or telegraphic system. Through this vital fluid, muscles move and organs perform their vital functions so that the body expresses perfect health. The better the health, the more of this solar fluid we are able to absorb, but we only use a certain amount of it, and the excess is radiated from the body in straight lines. You've probably seen paper ribbons placed in front of electric fans in candy stores or fruit stalls. When the fan is turned on, the ribbons float outward from the fan. Similarly, the ribbons of energy flowing from the periphery of the human body also radiate in straight lines when we are in perfect health. Therefore, this condition is aptly described as radiant health. We speak of such a person as if they radiate life and vigor. In such conditions, no germ of disease can enter their body. They cannot enter from the outside due to these invisible currents of force, just as a fly cannot enter a building with an extractor covering the opening. The microorganisms that enter the body with food are also quickly expelled, as the body's vital processes are selective, as demonstrated by the kidneys, which excrete waste matter while retaining the vital substances necessary for the body's economy. But the moment we allow thoughts of fear, worry, or anger, the body, so to speak, strives to close the doors against an imagined or real external enemy. Thus, the vessel also closes and stops specializing the vital fluid in sufficient quantities for the body's needs. We then see a phenomenon analogous to reducing the voltage or cutting more resistance in the electric fan. In that case, the paper ribbons will begin to droop and no longer flutter over the candy or fruit to protect it and keep flies away. Similarly, in the human body, when fear-based thoughts force the partial closing of the vessel, the fluid does not travel through the body at the same speed as before. It no longer radiates from the periphery in straight lines, but instead these lines wrinkle, allowing easy access to the harmful organisms that can then feed without obstacles on our tissues and cause disease. Whether or not mental scientists or others who believe in divine healing are aware of this law, they act in accordance with its dictates when they assert that they are children of God and have no reason to fear, for God is their Father, and He will protect them as long as they do not deliberately disregard the ordinary laws of life. The real fact and truth in the matter is that contagion comes from within. As long as we live sensibly, feeding our bodies with pure food from the plant kingdom, getting enough exercise and keeping mentally active, we can rest assured in the promise that the Lord is our refuge. No harm will come to us as long as we show our faith through our works. On the other hand, if we deny our faith in God by disregarding His laws, our expectations of health are vain. Power of thought. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he, said Christ. And this is an absolutely scientific proposition, something that everyone can demonstrate. Looking around at the everyday conditions of life in the home, office, or street, we see a man with thick lips, swollen cheeks, and a real bag under his chin, and we immediately know that we have before us a glutton and a sensualist. Another man comes down the street. His face is marked by lines. His lips are thin and firm, and we know that thought and care have been the architects that shaped his face. Each one who passes expresses exactly what their thoughts are inside. One is muscular and active because the thoughts that have governed his activities built an active body. Another has flabby flesh, a protruding belly, and a sluggish walk, showing that he is reluctant to exercise. In each case, the body is an exact reproduction of the mind. Each type suffers from the ailments peculiar to the strain of their mental activity. The glutton and sensualist suffer from diseases generated when their thoughts have crystallized and weakened the digestive tract. and the creative organs. Their diseases are entirely different from the nervous diseases that attack the thinker. Any system of healing that does not take into account the fact that the body is more a physical expression of the mind than the mind is a manifestation of the physical, man makes a very radical mistake in our complex nature. The mind and matter act and react on each other in such a way that it is absolutely necessary to consider man as a whole. Whenever we attempt to treat a disability, it is well known by physiologists that joy sometimes takes the patient out of the sick room faster than any medicine. If something happens to give their affairs in the world a sudden positive turn, so that they become optimistic, the illness seems to disappear as if by magic. Conversely, although it may seem like someone is in good health, the moment a depressing influence enters their business affairs, they begin to feel sick in their body. A letter containing bad news can sometimes completely halt progress and cause the person receiving it to have a severe attack of indigestion. Thus, the truth of the Saviour's teaching that, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he, is widely demonstrated in everyday life. When we realize this, we also see the need to cultivate an attitude of optimism. A hopeful mind is the greatest of medicines, and a constant reiteration of the resolution to overcome present evils is better than all the medicine in the world. When one is in constant pain, suffering acutely, it may be very difficult to maintain an attitude of optimism. However, the Saviour's magical formula applied to health will help us overcome it in time. It is a law that if we think of health, sooner or later, we must express health. We must live rationally and stop committing excesses, especially in eating. It cannot be emphasized enough. It is also of no use to stand in front of a mirror and repeat to oneself, "I have faith, I am healthy," or similar affirmations that are not true. Simply stop talking about your ailments to others, and above all, try to divert your own thoughts from your condition. Believe in health as our birthright, and something that can be achieved by us without hesitation. You may have heard the story of the elderly woman who had heard her minister speak of a faith that could move mountains. She was willing to test her faith on the pile of ashes, but the next morning, when she saw that it was still there, she exclaimed, "I knew it. The conditions were what I expected in my heart, not what I said I believed with my tongue." The same will happen with everyone. Therefore, believe wholeheartedly in health. Chapter 8. Dangers of excessive bathing. Although cleanliness itself is a virtue, it becomes, like many other good things, a vice through excess. Water is the universal solvent, and taken internally in small doses, it is good. But taken at the wrong time, with meals for example, and in excess, it becomes a poison. It dilutes the digestive fluids and cools the stomach, so the condition necessary for the proper treatment of food is disturbed. Over time, if the habit persists, digestion is permanently impaired. Likewise, when water is taken in excess under inappropriate conditions, it can seriously affect health. This has been demonstrated many times in our experiences at Mount Ecclesia. Several people who came here had the habit, before their arrival, of bathing every day, and sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. They were, without exception, in a very serious state of exhaustion because the excess water, applied with a towel or sponge, had drained their skin of its fatty substance, and the vasomotor system was unable to function properly to close or open the pores as required. But there was another effect of this excessive bathing that is not seen or understood unless one has the necessary hidden knowledge and spiritual sight to investigate the matter properly. Others may know the truth of the following explanation due to their own experience in the field of healing and magnetism. We all know that when we take a galvanic battery and place an electrode in a container of water, holding the other electrode in our hand, the flow of electricity through the body is much stronger than when we put the other hand in the water, or hold both electrodes without contact with the water. When water evaporates, its molecules break apart, and each fragment is enclosed in an etheric sheath that acts as a cushion. This is the basis for the elasticity of the vapor when condensation occurs. The excess ether disappears and the water becomes incompressible, like solid rock. But water has a great affinity for ether. However, it cannot take it from the air, just as we cannot absorb nitrogen, even though we breathe it continuously. The fluid is volatile in proportion to the amount of ether it contains, and we have an example of water's intense affinity for ether in its eagerness to absorb ammonia anhydrous, a fluid so volatile that it boils at -26 degrees Celsius. This demonstrates why water causes such a massive flow between a battery electrode and the body, and it also explains many phenomena, including why humidity so materially helps to transmit good magnetism, the vital fluid of the healer, to their patient, and to withdraw bad magnetism from the body. It is also necessary and useful to wash in running water, so that the poisonous ether extracted from the vital body of the patient does not hinder the healer. When we take a bath under ordinary conditions, we eliminate a significant amount of poisonous ether from our bodies. As long as we stay a reasonable time after a bath, the vital body becomes slightly attenuated, and consequently, it does not give us a feeling of weakness. However, if we enjoy good ordinary health and have not stayed in the bath too long, the deficiency is soon compensated by the flow of force that moves through the human body via the vessel. When this recovery has taken place, we feel renewed vitality and attribute it to the bath, not realizing the full facts as mentioned earlier. But when a person who does not enjoy perfect health begins to bathe daily, perhaps 2 or 3 times a day, an excess of ether is taken from the vital body. The new supply that enters through the vessel is also diminished due to the attenuated state of the vital body. Thus, it is impossible for such individuals to recover after repeated depressions, and as a result, the health of the dense body deteriorates. They lose almost every ounce of strength and gradually become confirmed invalids. In this delicate state, they are unable to eat and assimilate truly nutritious food, and over time, their condition can become very, very severe. Cases of this description are extremely difficult to manage because they often occur with people who have common signs in the angles, with many planets in these signs or with the sun or ascendant there. This class of people resents any interference with their diet and bathing habits because they believe they are paragons of cleanliness, which to their eyes is a primary virtue. They think they cannot live without so many daily baths, and since their appetite is so light and delicate, they believe they know better than anyone how to care for this part of their needs. But they are wrong in both cases. As shown above, the first step toward health involves completely stopping bathing. The dry bath is the proper restorative method, and the best way to do this is by using a pair of thick gloves made of untwisted linen tape. These can be used to rub the body in the morning and evening until the skin shows a healthy glow. Through this process, the superfluous cuticle is removed, but the oil and ether remain. Thus, the patient will strengthen very quickly, as when the chemical ether increases, the power of assimilation also revives, and there is an immediate gain in both strength and flesh. If necessary, the patient may receive a light hot sponge bath once a week, but no full bath should be attempted until they are fully recovered. Chapter 9. Blood transfusion. One of the latest discoveries in science is hemolysis, meaning that the inoculation of blood from the veins of a higher animal into one of a lower species destroys the blood of the inferior animal and causes its death. Thus, human blood injected into the veins of any animal is fatal, but from human to human, it has been proven that transfusion can take place, although sometimes deleterious effects occur. In ancient times, people married within their family. It was then looked upon with horror if one sought foreign flesh. When the sons of God married the daughters of men, that is, when the subjects of a leader married outside the tribe, there were great problems. They were discarded by their leader and destroyed, for at that time certain qualities had to develop in humanity, which we now possess. These were implanted in the common blood that ran pure in the family or small tribe. Later, when humanity had to descend into material conditions, international marriages were arranged, and since then, it has been considered equally horrifying for people from the same family to marry. The ancient Vikings did not allow anyone to marry into their family unless they had first gone through the ceremony of mixing blood to see if the transfusion of foreign blood into their family was harmful or not. All of this was because in earlier times, humanity was not as individualized as it is now. They were more under the dominion of the spirit of the race or family that dwelled in their blood, just as the group spirit of animals operates in their blood. Later, international marriages were established to free humanity from this yoke and to make each separate ego the sole owner of its own body without external interference. Science has recently discovered that the blood of different people has different crystals, so it is now possible to distinguish the blood of a black person from that of a white person. But a day will come when an even greater difference will be known. Just as there is a difference in the crystals formed by different races, There is also a difference in the crystals formed by each individual man. The thumbprints of two people are not the same, and in time it will be discovered that the blood of every human being is different from that of any other individual. This difference is already evident to the occult investigator, and it is only a matter of time before science makes this discovery. The distinctive traits are becoming more and more marked as the human being becomes less dependent and more self-sufficient. This change in blood is very important, and in time, when it has been accentuated, it will produce far-reaching consequences. It is said that nature descends in image and likeness. We are made in her image, and as we begin to geometrize, we naturally start with the substance where we, the human spirits, the egos, have the greatest power, that is, in our blood. When blood travels through the arteries deep in the body, it is a gas, but the loss of heat near the surface of the body causes it to partially condense, and in that substance, the ego is learning to form mineral crystals. In the Jupiter period, we will learn to invest them with a lower form of vitality and to cast them outside of us as plant-like structures. In the Venus period, we will be able to infuse them with desire and make them like animals. Finally, in the Vulcan period, we will give them a mind and govern them as the spirits of the race. At present, we are at the beginning of this individualization of our blood. Therefore, it is currently possible to transfuse blood from one human to another, but the day is approaching when this will be impossible. The blood of a white man will kill anyone beneath him, and the blood of an advanced person will poison the less cultivated. At present, the child receives its supply of blood from the parents, stored in the thymus gland for the years of childhood. But the time will come when the ego will be too individualized to function with blood not generated by itself. Then, the current mode of generation will have to be replaced by another, in which the ego can create its own vehicle without the help of the parents. Chapter 10. Effects of the removal of a physical organ. In general, when an arm, limb, or organ has been removed from the physical body through surgery, the dense part of the organ, impregnated with the planetary ether, is removed. The four ethers that make up the vital body of the person remain. However, there is a certain magnetic connection between the part that decomposes in the grave and the etheric counterpart that remains with the person. Therefore, the person feels pain and suffering in the removed part for some time after the operation, until decomposition occurs and the etheric counterpart disintegrates. However, there are some exceptions to this general rule that are worth noting. We have observed that the physical body adjusts as much as possible to the altered conditions. If a wound in a certain part of the body makes it impossible for the blood to flow through the normal channels, it finds another set of veins through which it can circulate. However, an organ never atrophies as long as it can serve some useful purpose. The same happens with the vital body composed of ethers. When an arm or limb has been amputated, the etheric counterpart of that limb is no longer required in the body's economy, and therefore it gradually diminishes. However, in the case of an organ like the spleen, where the etheric counterpart has an important function as a gateway for solar energy, this disintegration will not occur. It must also be remembered that wherever disease manifests in the physical vehicle, that part of the vital body first becomes thin, attenuated, and diseased. It was its inability to supply the necessary vital energy that caused the manifestation of the physical symptoms of ill health. Conversely, when health is restored, the vital body is the first to recover, and this convalescence is then manifested in the dense body. Therefore, if the physical spleen is diseased, it is an inevitable conclusion that the etheric counterpart is also in subnormal health, and the wisdom of removing the organ is doubtful. However, if it is done, the body will seek to accommodate itself to the new condition, and the etheric counterpart of the spleen will continue to function as before. Another interesting angle of this issue is revealed in the post-mortem state. When a person passes to the invisible realm, they think with the same mind and imagine themselves as they were in the world. As a result, a scar on the forehead or the loss of an arm or limb is reproduced by their thought in the matter of the desire world, and it appears there disfigured as it was here in the physical world. This was very notable during the World Wars. All soldiers who came out with injuries that could be seen, and whose effect had been determined, reproduced these injuries in their desire bodies. They felt a similar pain to what they would have felt if they were still in the physical body, because they imagined that there should have been a pain related to it. However, they were quickly helped by others, and by those who had been helped by the older brothers, to see the matter correctly. realizing that there was no real pain. Once they were convinced that their wounds were merely illusions and were taught that they could shape their bodies back into the normal, healthy state, they were able to remedy the condition quickly. Tonsil removal. The removal of the tonsils is a subject on which we are frequently asked for our opinion, and we have always advised against the removal of these necessary organs. It has been proven that severe throat and lung diseases often develop in later life as a consequence of tonsil removal, and an increasing number of doctors today denounce this surgery as entirely unnecessary. The tonsils are governed by Taurus, one of the signs of Venus. There is a strong sympathy between the signs ruled by the same planet. Libra, the other sign of Venus, governs the kidneys. The removal of the tonsils in the Taurus region affects the secretion of urine in the Libra region. Therefore, when the tonsils of a child are removed, the tendency toward gout and rheumatism increases in later years. In fact, the enlargement of the tonsils is due to conditions related to puberty and adolescence, possibly accentuated by an incorrect diet. This is a factor in most other throat diseases, as the larynx is the opposite of the generative organs, as demonstrated by the fact that the voice changes during puberty and in many other ways. When the adolescent period is over, these organs will return to their normal condition and will no longer cause any problems. In acute conditions, we have always recommended citrus fruits as the best-known antiseptics. This also applies, and particularly to pineapple. Lemonade made with lemons and honey provides great relief in this condition. Oranges and pineapple should also be used freely when a child complains of throat problems. A cold compress on the throat at night when the child goes to bed, complemented by a throat massage, will be an effective treatment for all throat problems. Needless to say, the intestines must be kept open and clean through the use of these simple treatments, and the problem will likely disappear in a few days, perhaps even without the need to put the child to bed. There is no need to fear if white matter is expelled during this treatment process. That is exactly what the child needs to eliminate in order to be well. Chapter 11. Healing Methods to Use. Introduction. The healing method to recommend depends on the nature of the illness and the temperament of the patient. If it is a leg wound, it is evident that a surgeon must be consulted. If it is an internal disorder, and it is possible to find an open-minded doctor, then in certain cases, that is the one to seek. If, on the other hand, one can resort to a mental healer, a Christian Science healer, or any other spiritually minded person, they can help a person who is strong in faith. Just like a tuning fork of a certain tone will resonate when struck by another tuning fork of the same tone, a person filled with faith will respond to the ministrations of these latter healers. But when the patient lacks faith in their methods, it is much better to send them to a regular doctor whom the patient trusts, because health or illness almost entirely depends on the state of mind. In conditions of illness, when a person is weakened, they become hypersensitive and should not be pressured in their preferences. Additionally, whatever the merits of any healing system, its effects on a given person will be beneficial, or the opposite in direct proportion to their faith in its healing power. Taking medicine is certainly our duty, taking medications administered by a properly qualified person, or attempting to cure the ailments we suffer from in any other way that appeals to us. We would be doing great harm if we allowed our physical instrument to deteriorate due to a lack of proper care and attention. It is the most valuable tool we possess, and unless we use it with discretion and take care of it, we are subject to the law of cause and effect due to that negligence. Laying on of hands. There are two very common difficulties in the practice of osteopathy and related methods of treatment by laying on of hands. In this process, there are two distinct operations. One is to remove from the patient something that is poisonous and harmful, which causes the disease, and there is also a transfer of vital force from the doctor or healer themselves. All those who have done any work of this type know this because they have felt it and continue to feel it. Those who succeed now are well aware of it. However, unless the doctor or healer is filled with radiant health, two things may occur. Either the human miasma that is removed from the patient can overwhelm the healer, causing them to take on the condition of the patient, or the healer may give too much of their own vital force, leaving themselves completely exhausted. Both conditions can combine, and then comes a day when the doctor or healer finds themselves exhausted and forced to rest. Magnetic healers, who are frankly unscientific, often avoid the first condition mentioned by throwing out the magnetism, as they say. but all are susceptible to being overwhelmed. This is something no one can escape, except those who can see the etheric emanations they take in and the vital fluid they give. Most people are energy vampires when they are sick, and the stronger and more robust they are ordinarily, the worse they tend to be when illness has thrown them into a bed or sickness. The following advice is valuable for keeping undesirable conditions away. First, fix your thoughts in such a way that you do not allow the miasmic emanations that come from the patient's body to enter yours beyond the elbow. Second, when you are giving treatment, step away from the patient from time to time and wash your hands under running water, if possible, but in any case, wash them in water and change the water as frequently as possible. Water has a dual effect. First, the emanations that come from the patient's body have an affinity with the water. Second, the moisture that remains on your hands allows you to take on the patient's miasma to a greater extent than you otherwise would. This is based on the same principle as when the electrodes of an electric battery are placed in water. You will see that the effect of the electricity is greatly intensified, as the water helps to conduct the energy. Similarly, when your hands are moist, they will attract the miasma from the patient much more than they would otherwise. If the conditions are such that you cannot obtain water, you can try to throw out the magnetism. But then it is necessary to be cautious, because when the magnetism is thrown off, it is attracted to the earth. As it is subject to gravity and for spiritual vision, it is a dark or rather gelatinous fluid. It lies, shining and trembling, on the ground. If the patient gets up, relieved from the stretcher where the treatment was given, and passes by the place where this magnetism was thrown out, the miasma will return into their body, and they will be in a worse condition than before starting the treatment. Therefore, the best policy is always to throw such miasmas out the window, or even better, place them in a fireplace and set them on fire. From the above, it is evident that laying on of hands is something that should not be performed indiscriminately by anyone who has not been trained in one of the many properly equipped osteopathy, chiropractic, or similar schools. Those who lead a dignified life are trained under the special direction of the older brothers. Vaccination and antitoxins. Bacteriologists have discovered that many diseases are caused by microorganisms that invade our bodies, and also that when this invading army begins to cause a disturbance, the body starts to produce opposing germs, or a substance that will poison the invaders. The key is to know which is stronger, the invaders or the defenders. If the defending microbes are more numerous than the invaders, or if the poison that is harmful to the invaders is produced in sufficient quantities, the patient recovers. If the defenders are defeated and the body is unable to produce a sufficient amount of the serum necessary to poison the invaders, the patient succumbs to the illness. It was also discovered that when a person has successfully recovered from a specific illness, they become immune to new attacks from that illness because they have the serum in their body that is deadly to the germs causing the disease they once resisted. From these facts, certain conclusions were drawn. If a healthy person is inoculated with a few germs of a specific disease, they will contract the disease in a mild form. They will then develop the life-saving serum and will be immune to that disease in the future. This is the philosophy of vaccination as a means of disease prevention. When a person has contracted a disease and is unable to produce enough serum to destroy the invading microorganisms, their life can be saved by inoculating them with serum obtained from someone who has become immune. Since it is not easy to obtain such antitoxins or cultures from humans, these germ and poison cultures have been obtained from animals. Much has been written both for and against the use of such methods to combat disease. The occult viewpoint goes beyond the issue we are addressing here. From the material side of life, there is no doubt that there are cases where disease has been avoided through the use of antitoxins. There are also cases where vaccination and antitoxins have caused the very fatality they were meant to prevent. But that is beside the point. From the occult perspective, vaccination and the use of antitoxins obtained through the processes used in bacteriological institutes are deplorable. These methods do harm to defenseless animals and poison the human body, hindering the ego's ability to use its instrument. If we study the chemistry of our food, we will discover that nature has provided us with all the medicine we need. If we eat well, we will be immune to diseases without the need for vaccination. When the body is in normal health, it specializes a much higher amount of solar energy than it can use. The surplus is radiated over the surface of the body with great force, preventing microorganisms from entering as they lack the strength to fight against the outgoing current. It is more by the same principle that a vacuum cleaner picks up dust particles in a room and throws them outside. This vital fluid cleans the body of harmful matter, including dangerous germs. We should not be surprised that this force is intelligent and capable of selecting the materials that need to be eliminated, leaving the beneficial and useful ones. Scientists recognize this fact through selective osmosis. They know that while a sieve will allow any particle of matter smaller than the mesh to pass through, the kidneys, for example, will retain the fluids useful to the body, allowing waste products to pass through. Similarly, the vital fluid makes a distinction, clearing the body of poisons and impurities generated inside and repelling similar products from the outside. This emanation has been called N-rays, or optic fluid, by scientists who discovered it through chemical reagents that make it luminous during digestion. It is weaker during digestion because extra solar energy is needed for the metabolism of food. The main factor is the amount of vital fluid used inside the body, and the weaker the outgoing current of elimination and protection becomes. Therefore, when we overeat, we are at the greatest risk of being invaded by an army of harmful microorganisms. On the other hand, if we eat in moderation and choose the easiest to digest foods, the decrease in the protective vital current will be minimized, and our immunity to disease will increase significantly without the need to poison our bodies with vaccines. Chapter 12. The Scope of Healing, the Law of Destiny. A growing number of medical practitioners are now convinced that the law of destiny is an important factor in the development of illness and in the delay of recovery. While they do not believe in the fallacy of an inexorable fate, they recognize that God does not afflict us voluntarily or seek to avenge the transgressor. They understand that all suffering and pain are meant to teach us lessons that we could not learn or would not learn otherwise. The stars indicate the estimated period necessary to teach us the lesson, but neither God can determine the exact time nor the amount of suffering required. We ourselves have a prayer, for we are divine. If we awaken to our transgression and begin to obey the law before the stellar affliction ceases, we cure our mental, moral, or physical disorder. If we persist until the end of a stellar affliction without learning the lesson, a more inevitable configuration will compel us to obey at a later time. Cancer and tuberculosis are seemingly incurable, but there is always the possibility they will yield, and indeed they will if the force directed against them is sufficient. Like all other physical manifestations, they are the result of a spiritual cause, and if we can reach it and counteract it with something of an opposite nature, there is a chance. While the attitude of resignation and inaction will certainly never cure the patient, a life in a healthy climate, a strong desire for health, a hope that does not know or allow discouragement, and a simple, nutritious, and healthy diet will cure even the worst case of tuberculosis. As for cancer, it is difficult to know when the debt of destiny that caused the problem has passed, and there are many recorded cases in which cancer has been cured, of course, in its milder forms. But even in its advanced stages, there is no reason to abandon hope as long as there is life. Regarding sclerosis, there are several methods by which deposits can be eliminated, and once they are removed, the patient can be as healthy as ever. This is particularly true if the patient can recognize the violation of the laws of nature that caused the disease in the specific case. It is for this purpose that we must work, whether or not the disease is cured, if the person can now be taught which laws have been transgressed, if they can be led to see the spiritual cause of the disease and learn to walk in the paths of virtue that align with the laws of God, then in the future there will be no disease for them. This is why we work to accelerate the day of liberation, to lead all of humanity toward the realization of health. As to whether we should interfere with destiny, let us first realize who made the destiny. We did. We set the force in motion that has now matured into destiny, and having done so, we certainly have the right to change it to the extent of our possibilities. In fact, this is the mark of divinity, governing ourselves. The greater part of humanity is ruled by the celestial orbs, which can be called the clock of destiny. The 12 signs of the zodiac mark the 12 hours of the day and night. The planets can be compared to the hour hand and show the year in which a particular debt of destiny is ready to express itself in our life. The moon indicates the month and attracts certain influences that we feel without knowing that they are being exerted or without realizing what they are for. But these influences tend to align our actions with the destiny we have created in past lives, and invariably what is foreseen will happen, unless, of course, there is a way to change it. Thank God there is a way, for if this were not so, if there were no possibility of changing destiny, then let us sit, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. We would be at the mercy of inexorable destiny, and we could not avoid it. But thanks be to God, there is a possibility that does not appear in the horoscope. The human will can impose itself and frustrate destiny, as Arlo Villa W.C. poetically expressed. A ship sails east and other west, with the same winds that blow. It is the set of the sail, not the gale, that determines the course it follows. It is of utmost importance that we set the sails of the boat of life as we wish and never hesitate to interfere with destiny. This also eliminates the idea of affirmation as a factor in life. It is, in itself, action and work that we need in life. As you will easily see with this illustration, suppose a small seed of those beautiful carnations were endowed with speech and came to you saying, "I am a carnation." You wouldn't respond, "No, you are not a carnation, you silly thing. You have the potential to become one, but you'll need to go out to the garden, bury yourself for a while, and grow. Only through that process will you become a carnation, never through affirmation." The same applies to us. All divine affirmations are vain and will not be accompanied by actions of divine character, and will never demonstrate our divinity as words alone cannot. The relationship of spirituality to health. The breakdown of strong physical health is necessary before equilibrium in the spiritual world can be achieved, and the stronger and more vigorous the instrument, the more drastic the method needed to break it. Then come years of fluctuating and imbalanced health, until we are finally able to adjust and maintain health in the physical world while also functioning in the higher realms. When we understand the higher philosophies and live the life they teach us, our body becomes extremely sensitive and must be given more care than that required for the body of an Indian or a black person in the jungles of Africa. They do not have a delicately organized nervous system like the white race. Those who are interested in spiritual development lines are particularly nervous. Therefore, as we progress, it becomes necessary to care more and more for this instrument, but we also learn the laws of its nature and how to adjust to them. If we apply our knowledge, it is possible to have a sensitive instrument and maintain it in relatively good health. However, there are cases in which illness is necessary to bring about certain changes in the body that are precursors to a higher step in spiritual development. And in such conditions, of course, illness is a blessing and not a curse. In general, however, it can be said that the study of higher philosophy will always tend to improve health because knowledge is power. The more we know, the better we can face all conditions, provided, of course, we put our knowledge into practice and live the life. Let us not be mere hearers of the word, but doers, for no teaching benefits us if we do not bring it into our lives and live it day by day. Nervousness helped by exercises. If a person of nervous temperament strives to perform the exercises of retrospection and concentration calmly and peacefully, they will experience a very beneficial effect, especially if they strive to relax every muscle of the body during the exercises. If the patient completely relaxes their muscles and reviews the events of the day calmly in the evening exercise, and concentrates on a high ideal in the morning exercise, the nervousness will gradually disappear. Chapter 13, on the conduct of healing centers, general suggestions for the management of healing centers. As the practitioners in various places have grouped together to study astrodiagnosis and astrotherapy in order to form healing centers, once they have sufficiently grounded themselves in these sciences, it may be beneficial to offer some suggestions for the management of such centers. First, we must remember that everything we do is for the benefit of Christ, and devotional exercises at the beginning of classes are absolutely necessary to balance the intellectual side of the work. Let us remember that Christ is now imprisoned on earth for our sake, bearing the heavy burden of the earth so that we may have the proper conditions for our evolution. Disease is the result of ignorance of cosmic laws and therefore a delay in evolution and a cause of the prolongation of Christ's imprisonment. When we alleviate human suffering, we are simultaneously reducing his suffering and accelerating the day of his liberation. Devotional exercises are a powerful means of tuning into Christ through which we gain an intuitive faculty by which we feel the suffering of others and simultaneously find ways to alleviate their pain. As Parsifal did with the cause of suffering when he was in the garden with Kundry and realized how he could heal the sick king. So above all, let us perform a devotional exercise by reading the Bible in reference to how Christ healed the sick and comforted those who suffered. Perhaps a few comments to help understand the lesson would be good. Take The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis, or any other work of a completely devotional nature, and then move on to the study of the human body. Knowledge of anatomy is absolutely essential. The body is the temple of the spirit that dwells within it. Just as an architect must know how to reinforce the pillars of a church when the wear and tear of time has caused the foundations to crumble, so we must know how to strengthen the various parts of the living temple with which we are concerned. There is a book titled The Story of the Living Temple by Rossiter, which treats the body in a spiritual way and will serve admirably as an aid to a higher conception, while ordinary textbooks are used for practical understanding. When taking a horoscope for analysis, ensure that you do not use the figures of the practitioners attending the meetings or their close family members, as, just as students in a medical school often develop symptoms of the diseases they are studying, the members of the class are also prone to suffering from neglecting this precaution. Moreover, when a practitioner is ill and requests healing at the center, they cannot be admitted to the classes while ill, as it is absolutely impossible to avoid the accidental mention of symptoms they may be suffering from, and thus the illness may worsen. Advice for healers. If it were possible to obtain fire letters that could be engraved in the consciousness of the reader, let us make every effort to achieve them in order to warn students about some particular points related to the practice of medical astrology. These are: never tell a patient an upsetting fact, never inform them when crises are approaching, never predict illness at a specific moment, never predict death. It is a grave mistake, almost a crime, to tell sick people anything discouraging, as it robs them of the strength that should be administered with the greatest care to facilitate recovery. It is also a mistake to suggest illness to a healthy person, as it focuses the mind on a specific disease at a particular time, and such a suggestion is liable to cause illness. It is a well-known fact that many medical students feel the symptoms of every disease they study and suffer greatly as a result of autosuggestion. But the idea of imminent disease implanted by someone in whom the victim has faith is much more dangerous. Therefore, the astrologer-physician must be very cautious. If they cannot say something encouraging, they should remain silent. This warning applies especially when treating patients with Taurus or Virgo ascendants, or with the sun or moon in these signs, as these positions predispose the mind to focus on illness, often in an unjustified way. The Taurus person fears illness to an almost unhealthy degree, and predicting illness is fatal to their nature. Virgos court illness to gain sympathy, and although they profess a desire for recovery, they actually delight in probing the matter deeply. They will claim to have the capacity to endure full knowledge and profess that it will help them. But if the practitioner is seduced by their protests and tells them, they will wither like a flower. These are the most difficult people to help in any case, and extra care must be taken not to aggravate their possibilities with actions of the indicated nature. Some students have a morbid desire to know the time of their own death and inquire about this matter in the most unjustified way. But no matter how much they try to deceive themselves, very few have the mental and moral resistance to live their lives the same way if they knew with absolute certainty that their earthly existence would end on a specific date. This is one of the points most wisely hidden until we are capable of seeing both sides of the veil, and we do wrong, whatever our grounds, trying to extract this knowledge from the horoscope. In the past, when our efforts to help the sick were necessarily limited to members due to lack of office assistance, questions such as, "How can I help a sick friend?" were sometimes raised. Although now we are prepared to provide help from the center to anyone, it is important to make the practitioners realize the great opportunity they have because of the connection they have established with the Master. Healing is mainly carried out by the practitioners who live under the direction of the elder brothers, and the request to them, written with pen and ink, whether sent through the center or to a practitioner, invariably evokes a response. The elder brothers know how to utilize the law in the best possible way, but they cannot work against it or do more than the material provided to them allows. Physical illness can be overcome by spiritual power, but a certain amount of this power is required. It is a law of physics that a number of carbons must be gathered, and enough oxygen must be provided to make a fire. Christ said, "Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I will be in the midst of them." The Association of Practitioners at the Healing Center provides the material in which the elder brothers can ignite the spiritual fire necessary to heal physical, moral, and mental ailments. Alone, there are few chances to do good, but in numbers there is strength, especially if everyone is strengthened by the knowledge of horoscope diagnosis and how to apply treatment at the propitious moments. The inauguration of the healing service on Holy Night harnesses spiritual power in the sun, pouring a blessing over the air from December 25th to June 25th. During this time, physical activities are on the rise, gradually gathering strength that culminates at the summer solstice. At that point, blessings are bestowed on humans physically with the necessary things for their material sustenance. During this period, spiritual activities are difficult to initiate, and so we patiently wait for the turn, recently celebrating the first healing service on Tuesday, June 23, 1914, at 7:30 p.m. when the moon was in the cardinal sign of Cancer. In the future, a healing service will be held every week at this time, on a day when the moon is in one of the cardinal signs. We decided to hold these services to make full use of the small pro-ecclesia, and thus earn the privilege of having the church as well. This was approved by the Master, who suggested that the healing service be held when the moon is in the cardinal signs. However, we wish to take a step further in our efforts to ensure efficiency, and here is where we seek the help of every sincere student of the Rosicrucian fraternity. There is a passage in the ritual used in the services of the Rosicrucian fraternity that says, "One single coal cannot make a fire, but when several coals are gathered, the heat latent in each can be ignited into a flame that emits light and warmth." In obedience to the same law of nature, we have gathered here tonight so that by combining our spiritual aspirations, we can ignite and keep alive the light of the beacon of true spiritual communion. The power of number is insignificant in the world of physical existence compared to the power of the same number in the spiritual realm. Here, additions to the power of a community count as 1, 2, 3, etc., but their power increases in a proportion that could be compared to the square: 2, 4, 8, 16, etc. For the first 12 who attend a spiritual service, the 13th then elevates it to another higher realm of the spiritual universe. As an illustration, we can count the increase there by the power of 3, 9, 27, etc., and so on. In this way, you will see how important even the weakest among us can become when it comes to showing our spiritual aspirations. One cannot doubt the powerful influence it will have on the sick to ensure the help of all serious students and give them the privilege to assist. To publish in the EOS each month the date when the healing services will be held, and if each student sits in their own house at 7:30 p.m., directing their thoughts to Mount Ecclesia, to the small pro-ecclesia, where the symbol of the invisible helpers will then be revealed, the love, sympathy, and strength thus given to these workers will allow them to perform a much greater service for humanity. Each of them, of course, has a part in this work. The symbol of the invisible helpers, on which we concentrate at Mount Ecclesia, is a white cross like snow, with 7 red roses and a pure white one in the center. The usual stars, rays emanate from the cross, and the background is blue with the whole thing beautifully illuminated, making it a fitting emblem for the urgency of that spiritual body in which these workers travel. There will be no need to make corrections regarding the time for their place of residence, because the sun will collect all the aspirations as it passes by, and when the rays, at the appropriate angle, reach Mount Ecclesia, the influence directed here will certainly be transmitted and will merge with our aspirations that are taking place at this moment, helping us in the work. Note: the time for this service has since changed to 6:30 p.m.